Hello, everyone. Welcome to Midnight Horror Whispers. I'm your storyteller tonight. I know many of you listen to these stories to fall asleep, so before you drift off, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Do it now, so you won't forget later. And just before we begin, leave a comment. Where in the world are you listening from? What time is it for you? Now, close your eyes, settle in, and let the whispers guide you into the dark. Story 1. They say trust your gut. I always have. And in all my life, it's never been wrong. So when I saw the little leaf in the corner of my son's eye just resting there like it had always belonged, every fiber of my body said one thing: don't touch it. Not with your bare hands. My wife Anya stood beside me, peering at Luke's face beneath the light. His 8-year-old features were calm, serious even, the way he always was, our little old man in a child's body. It's just a leaf, she whispered, reaching for it like she might pluck a piece of lint from his cheek. But I stopped her. My hand flew out before I even knew I was doing it. Don't, I said. Not with your fingers. She frowned. It's fine. I can get it out. It's barely in. What if it scratches his eye? I snapped. He'll go blind. Don't say that, she hissed back. It's right at the edge. It's nothing. Nothing. Then why did I feel like I was staring into a trap? Like whatever that leaf was, it had no business being in my son's body. There are plenty of maple trees outside. We live in a town where fall hits like a hurricane, where sidewalks turn red and gold every October. It's not unusual to find leaves inside, caught in the wind, clinging to jackets, slipping through open windows. But this one was different. It wasn't dry. It wasn't crunchy or curled. It was soft. Wet. Like it had grown there. Tweezers, I said. I'll get the tweezers. Anya didn't argue, but I saw the look in her eyes. She thought I was being ridiculous. Still, she didn't stop me as I hurried down the hall, rifled through the bathroom drawer. I didn't trust her not to try something while I was gone. She was stubborn. Fierce. Most of our fights came from both of us being so sure we were right. That we'd raised a kid together still amazed me. I came back with the tweezers and a pounding heart. Give them to me, she said, hand outstretched. No, I replied. I have the steadier grip. She opened her mouth to push back, but then Luke, still calm, still strangely composed, said quietly, I want Dad to do it. It wasn't fear or distress in his voice. No panic. Just acceptance. Like someone twice his age resigning himself to the inevitable. That's when I knew. Something was terribly wrong. I knelt in front of him, cradled the back of his head in my palm, and leaned in with the tweezers. Slowly, I took hold of the maple leaf's edge, gently, like it might scream if I pulled too fast. I began to tug. It came out slick, curled, moist with what looked like tears. But then it didn't stop. Attached to the base of the leaf was a tiny twig. And on that twig, more leaves. More growth. Damp. Glinting. And tinged with blood. Oh my God, Anya gasped. But I couldn't stop. My fingers kept pulling. 1 inch. 2. A branch now. Slender. Alive. Luke stood still the whole time. No flinching. No tears. Just silent trust. As if he wasn't afraid. As if this wasn't the first time it had happened. As if it was meant to be. I thought of him in the park, calmly pushing a stick into his eye like threading a needle. But no. That wasn't it. This hadn't come from outside. This had grown. A seed, maybe. A spore. Something had made its way in. And in the warm, wet darkness of his body, it had flourished. I don't remember what Anya was doing. I think she was screaming. Or maybe she was crying. I didn't hear her until she suddenly leaned over and snipped the twig with scissors, cutting it as close to his eye as she dared. The rest fell to the carpet in a sick thump. I jumped back, revulsion seizing me. I didn't want it touching me. Not even my clothes. "Luke," I said. "Are you okay?" He blinked, slow and mechanical. The stub of the twig caught on his lid. "I'm okay," he said. "I can't really feel it. Not that much, anyway." And I believed him. But I hated that I did. We took Luke to the hospital that same evening. Not because he asked, but because we needed anyone, to tell us this wasn't what it looked like. That what had just happened in our living room could be explained by science, by allergy, by imagination. They ran tests. X-rays. MRIs. Blood work. Hours passed. I sat beside Anya in the waiting room, watching her chew her bottom lip raw. She didn't say much, just squeezed Luke's hand like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. And Luke. Luke sat still. Drawing. A nurse had given him crayons and a little notepad. He was sketching trees. Over and over. Not happy trees. Not smiley suns above them. Just trees. Thin, sharp, bare. By the time Dr. Rillard called us into his office, I already knew we weren't walking out with peace of mind. He had that look, medical but heavy, like he'd been practicing the conversation in his head before we even opened the door. Luke sat in the corner while we faced the doctor. The scans were pinned on the wall. Not that he needed to say much. I could see it all. There, tangled between bones, creeping through muscle tissue, were branches. Leaves. Roots. The plant wasn't just in Luke's eye. It was in his lungs. His heart. His brain. "You thought this began with the leaf?" Dr. Rillard said quietly. "You thought a seed got in through his eye socket and spread from there?" I stared at the images. There was no point of origin. No epicenter. Just invasion. Complete and systemic. I'd seen ivy-strangled houses like this. Walls buckling under years of green. And now my son's body was the house. "Can't you remove it?" I asked. "Surgery. Something. There has to be something." Dr. Rillard shook his head. "If we try, he dies. The roots are too deep. They've integrated. Any attempt to cut it out would be fatal." Anya stood up, yanked one of the scans off the wall, and crushed it in her hand. "So that's it," she snapped. "You're telling us our son is dying, and there's nothing you're going to do?" "We can begin palliative care," he said gently. "We've seen others. Some like him. Some different. Others?" I said. "This isn't the first?" He didn't answer directly. "I can't discuss other patients," he replied, voice clipped. "You said some were like him," I pressed. "What does that mean?" He hesitated. "Some are calm. Like Luke. Some get angry. And between you and me, that's a lot worse." The way he said it made my stomach turn. Made me imagine twisted, bark-covered faces snarling through human mouths. But Luke wasn't angry. That almost made it harder. That night, we drove home in silence, Luke nestled between us in the back seat like a little ghost in pajamas. The stub of the twig still stuck from his eye, just beneath the lid. It didn't seem to bother him. He pointed out streetlights, asked questions about the moon. As if nothing had changed. As if his body wasn't being colonized by something green and ancient. Then it got worse. As we crossed the parking lot outside the hospital, a man stumbled toward us from the shadows. At first I thought he was drunk or sick. But then I saw the thorns. Rose thorns. Jutting out of his nose. His ears. His mouth. Bloodied petals clung to his cheeks like wet scabs. His eyes were gone. Blinded. Overgrown. "Sir," I called out. Let me help you. The man turned, staggered closer, twitching at the sound. My son is like you, I said. He has what you have. The man opened his mouth, revealing a tongue split by spines. His words were a gargled mess. But I heard them. It's happening to all of us, he rasped. It spreads. Touch, maybe. Or breath. They say, anyone close, gets it too. Anya began pulling Luke back, toward the car. I wanted to ask more. How long had he known? Where had he come from? Who was they? But the man wandered off, drifting toward the hospital, doomed to be turned away. Forgotten. As he vanished into the sliding glass doors, I looked down at Luke. He was watching the man go. Not afraid. Not sad. Just curious. Daddy, he said softly. I think he was lonely. In the days that followed, we tried to pretend. Pretend things were okay. Pretend that Luke wasn't changing. We cut the growth back gently each morning, snipping away at the fresh twigs sprouting near his jawline, the small leaves unfolding from the corner of his mouth. He never cried. Never complained. He read comic books like always, watched cartoons with the same wide-eyed focus. The only thing that changed was how quiet the house became, not with absence, but with restraint. Anya and I whispered more. We stopped answering calls. We kept the blinds drawn, especially on the side of the house facing the backyard. And yet, the world kept knocking. News reports turned from curiosity to panic. More children. More adults. Rural areas hit first: farmers, orchard workers, landscapers. The people closest to plants were the ones who changed first. Then came the cities. Subway passengers coughing up moss. A barista in Manhattan who bled dandelions into a cappuccino. No one knew how it spread. Was it airborne? Transmissible by skin? Some believed it wasn't a pathogen at all, but a message. A decision. A kind of vengeance. Nature has had enough, one biologist said on the evening news. And it's reclaiming us, root by root. Others disagreed. These are parasites, another expert argued. They mimic leaves and bark and blossoms, but they're something else entirely. Something new. But the worst were the ones who embraced it. The ones who believed this was the next stage of human life. We're evolving, said a woman on a late-night show, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. We're not dying. We're transforming. The plants don't grow on us. They grow from us. We are the soil now. She was removed from the panel mid-broadcast. The backlash was immediate. That same night, we watched live footage of protesters burning down whole forests, chanting slogans like, "If we kill the trees, we kill the infection." Fires spread faster than logic. Crowds cheered as green was turned to black smoke. But the irony was inescapable. They were torching the very lungs of the earth, all while coughing into cloth masks and screaming about survival. It's them or us, a masked boy said into a news camera. But either way, we're dying. That line stuck with me. Because it was true. The world was dying, just not in the way we'd always imagined. It wasn't bombs. It wasn't ice caps. It was roots, quietly threading through our insides, turning people into flora one cell at a time. Then the rumors began. Word of a chemical compound unnamed, unapproved, untraceable. Some said it came from rogue labs, others from old government stockpiles. Inject it, bathe in it, drink it, whatever worked. Supposedly, it burned the infection out. Killed the plant. Left the host alive. It was expensive. Rare. Dangerous. Some said it was snake oil. Some said it worked. Some never lived long enough to say anything at all. Still, demand exploded. People lined up in alleys. Shared recipes online. Bunkers were stocked. Cities broke into zones. Order crumbled. But in our little house on the edge of town, we still clung to the fantasy of normalcy. We baked cookies. We played board games. We tucked Luke in each night like he wasn't growing more and more silent, like his veins weren't darkening beneath his skin. We told ourselves we were keeping him safe. That the worst was out there, not in here. But even lies need oxygen. One night I found him downstairs, sitting cross-legged in front of the television. The news played on low-volume, flames, interviews, the same cycle of panic. Luke didn't look away. His fingers absently pulled at the edges of the leaf growing from his eyelid. "Why are people burning the trees?" he asked. I didn't know how to answer. I just sat beside him and held his hand, praying he'd still feel like my son. Days passed. Then weeks. And one morning, he was gone. The back door stood open. The breeze carried in a scent of sap. Anya screamed, and I followed her outside. And there he was, kneeling in the grass. A maple tree rising through his neck, splitting his spine like a pole. His arms hung limp. His eyes. God, I couldn't look at them. The bark around his skull had twisted into something almost human. Almost peaceful. "What are you doing?" Anya sobbed as I returned from the shed with gloves and a spade. "I'm going to bury him," I said flatly. "Before they come for him. Before the neighbors see." But she grabbed my arm. "No. Leave him. Please. This is what he wanted." I stood there, fists clenched, unable to move. Not because I agreed, but because I couldn't bring myself to break the silence. We left him there. And the tree kept growing. The days after we left Luke in the yard felt like a second kind of death. Not his, but ours. We moved around the house like shadows. Ate what we had to. Slept when our bodies gave out. Spoke only when silence became unbearable. Every morning, I peeked out through the blinds on the back window, though I never really wanted to. The tree that was once my son grew taller with each passing day. Its branches reached outward, lazily, as if stretching after a long nap. The trunk thickened. The leaves darkened. Sometimes I swore I saw them tremble when the wind was still. I tried to convince myself it was only guilt playing tricks on me. That trees don't remember being boys. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. One morning I watched Anya out there, kneeling by the tree, whispering to it. Her fingers gently touched its bark like skin. I didn't go outside. I just watched her and wondered whether she'd already stopped seeing Luke as gone. Whether she was slowly becoming part of that garden too. That night, we lay in bed like always, but there was something in the air heavier than grief. Her back pressed against mine. Her breathing slow and even. I ran my hand along her side, trying to remind myself she was still here. Still human. And then I felt it. A sharp point beneath her shoulder blade. Small. Hard. I pinched it and pulled. In my fingers, a tiny maple leaf. Fresh. New. I jerked my hand away like it had burned me. "What's wrong?" Anya murmured without turning. "Cramp," I said quickly. "Just gonna stretch." I stepped out into the kitchen, heart pounding. I closed the door behind me and looked down at what I was holding. The leaf. Still green. Still alive. I sat at the counter and wept like a child. Not just for Luke, but for her. For myself. Because now I understood something I hadn't before: why those who were infected didn't feel anything at first. Why they smiled and claimed it didn't hurt. Because when you don't know what's growing inside you, you don't feel it. But once you do, once you recognize it, it becomes unbearable. Suddenly, every twitch is a root. Every ache a bloom. I could feel it then. Deep in my muscles. Curling through my chest. Something slow and patient threading its way into my brain. And the worst part? It didn't feel foreign. It felt like mine. Like it belonged. I realized that was how it won, by convincing you it was you. And Anya, she had already given in. She spoke less, slept more, kept her eyes fixed on the tree outside like it was a tether, not a tomb. One afternoon, I watched her press her hand against the bark and say, "We're almost ready." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. I started researching the chemical. The one people whispered about online. The one said to kill the infection. Most called it a hoax. Some claimed it worked. Others said it would kill you faster. But those warnings didn't matter anymore. I tracked down a source. A man who delivered it in unmarked glass vials, no instructions, no promises. Just one sentence written in marker on the box: "Take it before the tree takes you." I hid the vials in the garage, beneath the old Christmas decorations and broken garden tools. I hadn't told Anya. Not yet. But soon. Because I couldn't let it end like this. Not for her. Not for me. I wouldn't rot in the sun, arms limp, leaves waving like surrender flags. I wouldn't become part of a yard people crossed the street to avoid. If the chemical worked, it would burn the roots out. Save what was left. And if it didn't, God help me, I'd burn everything down myself. The tree. The house. The infection. I'd die a man, not a forest. Because no matter how much green grew inside me, I still remembered how it felt to be a father. A husband. And I wasn't ready to let that die. I don't know how much time I have left. A week, maybe. Maybe less. The vines had begun to tug at something in my spine, a quiet pressure in the back of my neck like roots testing the softness of the earth. My fingertips twitch when I hold still for too long. My chest creaks at night. And still, I haven't taken the chemical. I keep the vial hidden, tucked in a toolbox beneath a pile of rusted screws, staring at it some nights like it might open its own lid and crawl inside me. I don't know if I'm afraid of it not working or of it working too well. What will I be if it succeeds? What will I be if it fails? I haven't told Anya yet. Not directly. But she knows. She can feel it too. I see the change in her, the way she moves slower, speaks softer, spends more time with the tree that used to be our son. She brings it water. Tends to the leaves. One afternoon I saw her laying a folded blanket at its base like a picnic. "He's still here," she whispered once, when she caught me watching. "He listens when the wind blows." I didn't have the heart to tell her that I still dream of his voice. But in my dreams, he isn't speaking. He's humming. Just a low, rhythmic hum like wind through branches, or a lullaby without words. Sometimes I wake up with that sound lodged in my throat. Sometimes I hum it too. We've stopped pretending this will go away. The world outside is quieter now. Not in the peaceful way, but the vacant way. The broadcasts have thinned. Some stations have gone completely dark. The cities are full of empty streets and overgrown parks. I saw a drone feed of New York last night, Times Square blanketed in moss, storefronts blooming with ivy. A man sat in the center of it all, half submerged in a fountain, with sunflowers pushing through his chest like buttons on a coat. He looked serene. Beautiful, even. Like a statue carved by nature itself. But that's not how I want to go. That's not how I want Anya to go. I'm not stupid. I know I might already be too late. The plant could be too deep, too stubborn. The chemical might burn through me like acid and leave nothing behind. But if it has even a chance, one flicker of possibility, then I have to try. I owe Luke that. I owe Anya that. Because love isn't just standing by someone while they turn into something else. Sometimes love is dragging them back. Even when they beg you not to. Tomorrow, I'll tell her. I'll ask her to come with me. I'll hold her hand like I did the night we buried our son, like I did before the leaves started growing. I'll look her in the eyes and say, "We can fight this. Even now." And if she refuses, if she's too far gone, then I'll do what I must. For both of us. Because I remember who we were. I remember laughing over cheap red wine on the back porch. I remember painting Luke's room yellow before he was born, arguing over whether it looked more like corn or custard. I remember hearing him cry for the first time, and the way Anya looked at me like we'd made something holy. I remember being human. And I intend to stay that way. If the injection fails, if the leaves keep growing, if my skin splits and the green pours out, I will not let it end quietly. I'll strike the match. I'll torch the tree that took my son. I'll carry my wife into the flames if I have to. Not out of cruelty, but out of love. Out of defiance. Out of memory. The world is ending in forest fires. And I will burn with it. But I'll burn still a father. Still a husband. Still a man. Story 2. Would you rather kill someone with a spoon or a butter knife? That was the very first thing he asked me. No hello, no handshake, no offer of coffee. Just that cold, gleaming question delivered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't answer. Not right away. I think he expected that. He was watching me closely, too closely, not for the words I might say, but for the flinch in my eyelid, the twitch in my jaw, the way my hands sat on my thighs. Dr. McDonough. Tall, pressed suit, perfect teeth, and a grin that looked like it had been stapled to his face decades ago and had never quite come off. He wasn't interested in the answer. He was interested in the reaction. I leaned back in the chair, kept my tone even. How is that relevant to my position in the experiment? His smile widened, reflexive, mechanical. They're just icebreakers. Meant to help us get to know each other. Right. You want to know about the job, don't you? I nodded. He leaned forward. The company has built a town. A real town, in an undisclosed location somewhere in Oregon. They call it Ashfield. It's fully contained, self-sufficient, and currently uninhabited until next week. Your job would be to oversee it. Head of security. I frowned. I'm not law enforcement. You don't need to be. Think of it more as a behavioral role. You're there to maintain the illusion of order. Make sure people follow the rules. Patrol the streets. Escort the disobedient back to their homes. Stop anyone from leaving. That sort of thing. Sounds more like containment. It's just a prestigious security gig. Short term. High reward. I'd heard that line before, companies dressing up dead-end work in shiny words to distract from low pay and zero purpose. But this one felt different. There was something about the way he said containment without saying it. Something about the way he watched me, like he already knew I would say yes. How long? I asked. 100 days. From the moment you arrive to the moment you leave. And the purpose of the experiment? Not your concern. You'll be on a need-to-know basis. When you're in Ashfield, you follow orders. No questions. No speculation. I know that may sound rigid, but it's vital to the success of the study. No questions? Not even one. I hesitated. That should have been a deal-breaker. But something about the whole thing pulled at me. Maybe it was the money I didn't yet know the amount of. Maybe it was the fact that no one else had offered me anything since my credentials were blacklisted 6 months ago. I'll think it over. How soon can you give us your answer? His tone shifted, just slightly. Like he was holding something back. A couple days. We do have other candidates. Ex-military. Former federal agents. People who don't need convincing. The insult was clear. So was the bluff. They needed someone, and not just anyone. Then why me? I asked. He paused, then said softly, because we did a full psych profile. You're assertive, but you're not a hammer. You follow rules, but you know when to break them. People trust you, even when they shouldn't. And that makes you perfect for this environment. The people we're bringing into Ashfield, they need someone real. Someone strong but human. Then he pulled a document from a drawer and slid it across the desk. My eyes scanned the numbers. 5 figures. For 100 days. Enough to pay off the credit cards, the rent, the lawyer fees. Enough to disappear for a while afterward. Finish the experiment, he said, and you won't have to work again for a long time. His smile flashed again, plastic, hollow, unchanging. And just like that, I was in. They didn't give me a map. Just an itinerary, 3 connecting flights, followed by a bus that smelled like bleach and vinyl, and finally a white van with no license plates. By the time we reached Ashfield, the sun was already behind the trees, casting long shadows across the 2-lane road that led to nowhere. I had expected something barebones, trailer homes, gravel, chain-link fences, but Ashfield wasn't that. It looked real. Too real. Fresh pavement. Clean sidewalks. American flags on porches. The kind of town you'd see in a pharmaceutical commercial. The only thing out of place was the wall. Tall, pale concrete stretching around the entire perimeter, topped with smooth metal and hidden by dense pine trees. No gates. No towers. Just sealed isolation dressed up like home. The van didn't stop in front of a house. It pulled into a small building with steel doors and no windows. A man stepped out before I could reach for the handle. Chambers? Yeah. Travis Baker. Security liaison. He extended a hand, firm grip, calloused palms, no bullshit in his eyes. I'd worked with his type before. Reliable in a crisis. Terrible at small talk. We'll be working together, he said. They said you'd be coming today. What else did they say? That you're the guy who asks too many questions. I didn't reply. He motioned me inside. The security station was sparse, 2 desks, wall of monitors, landline phone with 1 button, 2 bunks in the back. Everything smelled like new paint and cold electronics. Baker pointed me to the far desk. That's yours. Read the packet on the chair. Covers everything. Then his radio crackled. He listened, nodded, and disappeared without another word. I dropped my duffel and sat down. The packet was thick. On the first page, bold letters greeted me, "Welcome to ASHFIELD, population 46. I flipped past the mission statement fluff, the corporate branding language, until I reached the rules. A header stamped in red, security rules, top priority 1. Curfew is 10 p.m. All participants must be in their assigned homes. Repeat offenders may be fined or detained. 2. Mandatory head counts at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Failure to report is grounds for contract breach. 3. Clinical trials are conducted at the Ashfield Medical Facility. Attendance is mandatory. Refusal is a detainable offense. 4. Report all strange occurrences using the landline. 5. Remember their faces. That one made me pause. Whose faces? The participants? And what did remember mean? For tracking? For something else? I read on. 6. Some participants are undercover company operatives placed to test security integrity. You will not be told who they are. Do not assume compliance. Do not assume truth. 7. Participants are not allowed to leave for any reason. Attempts to do so must be stopped immediately. 8. Events that appear unlawful or unethical may be part of the experiment. Do not interfere. I leaned back. The protocol didn't leave room for improvisation. But it didn't explain much either. Everything here, every sentence, every instruction, was built to confuse just enough to make obedience easier than curiosity. I looked up at the monitor wall. 20 cameras. Street corners. Living rooms. Kitchens. Bedrooms. One of them showed a bathroom. A woman stood beneath the stream of a running shower, unaware of the black lens watching from the corner of the ceiling. I looked away. That was the first moment I understood what kind of place Ashfield really was. Not a town. Not a set. A mirror. One way. And I was on the wrong side. The first few days went by in a blur of routine. Participants arrived in waves, each given fake jobs and identities: cashier, mechanic, schoolteacher, barista. The company called it immersive role simulation. I called it performance with medication. Every morning, Baker and I would conduct head counts in front of the medical facility. People would shuffle into the square half asleep, clutching coffee cups, murmuring idle chatter that sounded rehearsed. Every evening, same thing. 40 names, 40 faces, twice a day. Until the fifth morning. "Chief," Baker said, pulling me aside, "we've got a problem." His tone wasn't panicked, but it was tight. "What kind?" "There's 41 of them." I blinked. "Did you miscount?" "No." I checked 3 times. I studied the crowd. The same dull expressions. Same rustling of jackets, same shifting of weight from foot to foot. But now, with just one more body, one more variable, they felt like a crowd instead of a group. "Go back to the station," I said. "I'll double check." I walked the line myself. One by one, I made eye contact, mentally matching faces to files. Some smiled. Some nodded. Some stared through me like they were only half here. I reached the end. 41. Again. I looked at the sheet in my hand. 40 names. 40 IDs. Nothing new. No visitor badge. No company staff unaccounted for. But there was someone here who didn't belong. I radioed Baker. "Call HQ, use the landline." 5 minutes later, he came back on. "They said thank you for reporting." "That's all." "That's all?" "Told me to proceed as usual." I paused. I wanted to ask more, but I knew better. I gave the order to release the group into the medical facility. They filed in, shoulders hunched, eyes down. That afternoon, I reviewed the participant roster again. It now listed 41 names. No edits. No additions. No trace of change. I opened the manual I had read on my first day. The same bold page that had once said, "Welcome to Ashfield, population 46." Now it said, "Welcome to ASHFILD, population 47." I stared at it, my hands still, the air around me gone heavy. Either the records had always been wrong, or they were being changed in real time. And if they could rewrite the numbers, how much else could they rewrite? I checked the security logs. Every document reflected the new total. 41 participants. 6 security. I looked through archived reports I had printed myself. Same numbers. As if the paper itself had changed while I wasn't looking. As if I had never read 40. As if 40 had never existed. I should have stopped there. I should have filed it away under things above my pay grade. But one phrase kept circling in my head. The one from the handbook, printed in red, "Remember their faces." And I did. I remembered all of them. But now there was one more. It was day 6 when she approached me. I was doing my afternoon rounds near the South Loop, where the houses curved into a fake cul-de-sac with decorative mailboxes and neatly trimmed hedges that no one actually maintained. She walked up calmly, her posture stiff but not fearful. Early 30s, dark eyes, hair pulled back. I'd seen her before, house number 12. Registered name, Dana Halpern. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled slightly, barely enough to notice. I nodded. We stepped behind a parked company vehicle, out of sight of any cameras. Or so I thought. "I don't think I'm real," she said. Just like that. Flat. Emotionless. No build-up. "What makes you say that?" I asked. "Things don't add up," she said. "I dream about people I've never met. Places I've never been. Every morning I wake up, I remember less. Yesterday I thought my name was Marie. Marie? It felt right. More right than Dana. But when someone called me that, I didn't correct them. It was easier. Have you spoken to the medical team? I asked. They told me it was a side effect of the medication. But I haven't taken anything since day 2. I fake it. I switched the pills with sugar tablets I brought. Just wanted to know if they'd notice. Did they? She shook her head. No. That's what scares me. I didn't respond. My throat had gone dry. I saw you write it down, she said. The number. 41. In your notebook. I tensed. When? 2 days ago. Through the station window. You counted. You paused. You wrote 41. She leaned closer. So I know I'm not the only one who notices. I looked around, suddenly unsure who might be listening. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I don't know how much longer I'll be here. Or who I'll be tomorrow. That night, I checked her file. Dana Halpern. No mention of Marie. No alias, no red flags, no mental health notations. The medical records were clean. Sterile. Too clean. I cross-referenced camera footage of her daily activities. Everything looked normal. Conversations. Chores. Participation in clinical sessions. But each clip felt like a loop. The same smiles. The same gestures. The same expressions with different audio. Like watching a puppet show with swapped voices. The next morning, she didn't show up. Not for the head count. Not for the afternoon walk schedule. Not in her house. Her bed was made. Her toothbrush was still wet. But she was gone. I asked Baker if he'd seen her. He looked confused. Who? Dana. House 12. We don't have a Dana in House 12, he said. I walked straight to her house. It was empty. Cleared out. No signs of struggle. No forwarded file. When I checked the roster again, the name wasn't there. As if she had never existed. I ran to my desk. Opened my notebook. Flipped through the pages until I found the line I had written, Day 5, head count, 41. I circled it. Underlined it. Then wrote below, Dana/Marie, missing. I sat there for a long time, staring at the ink until it bled through the page. It was no longer about the test subjects. Something was testing me. I stopped trusting the screens after that. I still watched them, still logged the hours, still filled out the forms and walked the loops and said the words, but I no longer believed what the cameras showed me. Because Dana hadn't walked out of Ashfield. She had been erased. Not just physically, but systematically file, footage, memory. Even Baker, who stood next to me during every head count, swore there had never been a Dana. You sure you're not mixing her up with someone else? He asked, eyes squinting, voice careful. You've been putting in long hours. I didn't reply. I just wrote Day 7, head count, 40 in my notebook and underlined it hard enough to nearly tear the paper. That night, I did something reckless. I searched for my own name. Not in the participant files, I knew I wouldn't be there, but in the personnel system. Security logs. Payroll index. Shift reports. Nothing. No Christopher Chambers. Not even a last name match. Baker was listed. So were 2 rotating temp guards who flew in from the company every 3 weeks. But me? No entries. No photos. No record of arrival. I opened the onboarding manual. The one McDonough gave me. First page, assigned site lead, Dr. Kelly. Not McDonough. Not the man I sat across from in that cold, carpeted room weeks ago. The man who smiled too perfectly. The man who promised I wouldn't have to work again. I checked the call log on the landline. The last call made was from Baker, reporting the headcount anomaly. No calls under my ID. No record of my contact with HQ. That was when I heard it. A knock. Not loud. Just one. Firm. Precise. I opened the door. No one was there. But lying on the mat was a folded piece of paper, crisp, perfectly creased. I unfolded it under the ceiling light. In neat black ink, it read, "You are the 42nd." I didn't move. I just stood there, the paper fluttering slightly in the AC breeze. I turned it over. There, faintly scrawled in pencil, was a second message. "You were never hired." I sat at the desk, paper still in hand. On the monitor, people moved as usual, someone jogging in loops around the square, someone watering fake plants, someone pushing an empty stroller up and down a road that led nowhere. But now it all felt different. Performative. Monitored. Controlled. And I wasn't the one watching anymore. I was inside the frame. I pulled my notebook close, turned to the last page, and wrote, Day 8, head count, 40, plus 1 with a badge and no file. I drew a box around it. Slowly. Deliberately. My hand was shaking. I wasn't the observer. I was the variable. And for the first time since stepping into Ashfield, I realized the real question wasn't who the extra person was. It was when they had started counting me. Story 3. My name is Jebediah. I'm making this recording because I don't know what else to do. I'm hoping maybe someone out there, somewhere, has seen what I've seen. And can maybe tell me I'm not going crazy. I ain't much for technology, hell, I still write checks at the feed store, but I've got this little recorder here and I figured it might be time to use it. If not for answers, then maybe just to get it out of my chest, 'cause it's been sitting there like a hot stone for near 3 years now. I've lived on this land all my life. Was born in the back room of that old stone house looking over the creek. My daddy raised me to respect the soil, to watch the clouds like they were scripture, and to always listen when the wind tries to tell you something. His daddy before him broke this land in with a mule team and a dream, back when Texas was still learning how to be Texas. This place ain't just home. It's blood. Bone. History buried deeper than post holes. And for most of my life, the land talked to me in the ways it always had, through the rustle of mesquite, the chatter of jackrabbits, the way the cattle shift when a storm's brewin'. But that changed. The land don't speak no more. Not like it used to. And what replaced its voice? Well, I don't have a name for it. Not yet. But I can tell you this much, when the sounds of the prairie died, something else came listening. And I ain't been right since. It didn't begin with lights in the sky or mutilated cattle or government men in shiny shoes. It began with silence. A kind that ain't natural. A kind that presses down on you like a wet wool blanket. It was about 3 years ago, just after the first frost. I remember 'cause I'd been out stringing barbed wire along the east fence, and the air had that crisp snap to it that makes you think maybe this year winter won't be so mean. That night, I was sitting out on the porch like I always do, mug of coffee, dogs at my feet, watching the stars yawn awake one by one. But something was off. It took me a few minutes to put my finger on it, but then it hit me, the coyotes weren't singing. Not a yip, not a howl, not even the distant whimper of one wandering too far from the pack. Just stillness. I figured maybe they'd moved on, chasing rabbits elsewhere. But the next night, it was the same. And the night after. 3 nights of nothing. And that's when I really started to listen. It wasn't just the coyotes. The crickets, the owls, the frogs down by the creek, all gone. Like someone turned the volume of the whole damn world down to 0. My dogs, normally barking at every tumbleweed that dared roll past the gate, stayed huddled by the door, eyes wide, ears pinned. One of them let out this low, mournful whine that twisted in my gut in a way I ain't felt since my daddy's funeral. I walked the fence lines. Checked for poison, traps, anything that might explain it. But there wasn't nothing. No tracks, no scent, no sign of disease. Just an eerie stillness that stretched from horizon to horizon. And the more I listened, the more it felt like the silence wasn't just the absence of sound. It was something alive. Watchin'. Waitin'. Like the land itself was holding its breath for something awful. At first, I told myself it was just nature being fickle. Animals move, climates shift, maybe it was just a strange season. But a week after the silence started, I found something that tore that hope right out of me like a splinter from bone. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I always checked the north fence on Tuesdays, part habit, part schedule, part superstition. I took the truck out toward the stock tank up in the hills. The country out there's rough, scrub brush, broken rock, dry gullies that twist like old scars across the land. As I rounded a bend, I saw something by the water. A dark shape. My first thought was one of my heifers had just laid down, maybe taking shade under the cliff edge. But she didn't move when I got closer. Even with the rumble of the truck. I pulled up slow, stepped out with my rifle like I always do, not because I expected trouble, but because I was raised cautious. The moment I saw her up close, my gut twisted. It was one of my best Charolais heifers. Young, strong, nearly ready to calve. Dead. Just laying there like someone dropped her from the sky. No blood. No struggle. I circled around her, looking for signs, a cougar maybe, or wolves from up north. Hell, even a bear wandering down the Pecos. But there were no tracks. None. Just dry dust and my own boot prints. That's when I noticed what had been done. Her tongue was gone. Cut out clean from the root. Her udder, too. Both missing like they'd been scooped out with surgical precision. But it wasn't just the missing parts, it was how it was done. The flesh around the wounds was blackened, hard, like melted plastic. Smooth as glass. No bite marks. No ragged edges. Just two perfect, cauterized circles. I touched one, and it was cold. No rot, no buzzin' flies, no signs of decomposition. It was like she'd just stopped. Like time had skipped her. I stood there for a long time, the kind of long where the sun moves and your shadow creeps. My rifle hung useless in my hand. I knew in that moment I wasn't dealing with nature. Predators are messy. Death is messy. But this? This was precise. Intentional. I've seen plenty of death in my life, sickness, accidents, butch errant season, but never something that felt so wrong in its silence. Like it hadn't come from teeth or talons, but from a thing that didn't care about life or pain or blood. A thing that wasn't from here. And I had the gutsick feeling it was just getting started. The days after I found her were thick with a kind of dread that don't show up in daylight but hangs heavy come sundown. I buried the heifer myself. Couldn't bring myself to call the vet or the AG inspector, what would I even say? She died clean? Got cauterized by ghosts? So I did what ranchers do. I kept moving. But the land wouldn't let me forget. My dogs stopped barking altogether. Wouldn't leave the porch. Even when I rattled the feed bin, they stayed put, ears twitching, eyes on the tree line like they expected it to blink. The herd changed too. Cattle are dumb as posts sometimes, but they know fear. They feel it in the dirt. Instead of wandering and grazing, they started bunching up, sticking close, heads up, eyes alert. They'd huddle in the far corners of the pasture, far from the stock tank where I found the heifer. Wouldn't go near that area even if it meant missing the best graze. Then, one night, I was stirred from a half-sleep by a thunderous roar, not from the sky, but the ground. A stampede. I grabbed my rifle and truck keys and tore out there, tires kicking up chalky dust. I expected rustlers maybe, or coyotes, something to spook em. But when I got to the field, there was nothing. Just my herd, wild-eyed and trembling, pressed hard against the south fence like they were trying to push right through it. Not one scratch on em. No predator. No threat. Just an emptiness so wrong it made my teeth itch. Whatever had scared em wasn't still there, but it had been. And whatever it was, they'd seen it, smelled it, felt it. I hadn't. That was the first time I truly understood this wasn't something I could shoot. Wasn't something I could chase off with firelight or buckshot. This was something I couldn't see unless it wanted me to. After that night, sleep became a memory. I started sitting out on the porch later and later, my rifle across my lap more out of ritual than reason. I wasn't waiting to stop something anymore. I was trying to understand it. Trying to catch it in the act. The sky out here's always been clear, big enough to make a man feel small and humble before God. But now it felt like a stage, and I was waiting for the curtain to rise. One night, I was watching Orion climb over the mesquite, coffee long gone cold, when I saw the lights. Not planes, Lord knows I've seen enough of those buzzing out of Del Rio. Not satellites either. These weren't moving right. 3 points of light, burning bright white, hanging in the sky like they'd been stapled there. They formed a perfect triangle. No drift, no wobble. Just stillness. I squinted, holding my breath, and then one of them vanished. Not dimmed, vanished. Blinked out and popped back up a mile away, instant and clean. Then all three began to move, slow at first, pulsating a sickly green glow, then shooting across the sky like they were being yanked by invisible string. No sound. No trail. Just impossible speed and movements that laughed in the face of physics. They turned at 90 degrees, hard and sudden, then zipped straight up into the black and disappeared. I sat frozen. My hands were gripping the rifle like it was a cross. My brain was trying to make sense of it: drones, experimental aircraft, tricks of the eye. But none of it stuck. My gut, the same gut that's felt storms coming hours ahead, that's known when a calf's gonna drop before the signs show, that gut was screaming. This wasn't man-made. And it sure as hell wasn't natural. It felt old, like something that didn't belong under the Lord's stars, but had been there longer than any of us knew. And worst of all, it felt like it knew I was watching. Come morning, I didn't need the coffee to get moving. My nerves had done the waking for me. I hopped on the ATV and rode out to check on the herd, heart thudded in like a war drum. I didn't know what I expected, maybe more dead cattle, maybe nothing at all. But what I found, it stopped me cold. I crested the big hill overlooking the south pasture, and there it was. A mark on the land like a brand from the sky. A massive circle carved into the tall grass, at least 100 feet across. Inside it were rings, lines, shapes I didn't have names for, like geometry. Got drunk and started praying. I killed the engine and just sat there for a minute, listening to the quiet scream in my ears. Then I climbed down and walked toward it. The air changed the second I stepped close. Still. Warm. Like the place had its own breath, and it was holding it too. The grass wasn't broken. That's what chilled me. Each stalk was bent about an inch above the dirt, not snapped, just folded. And they weren't random, neither. They were laid in spirals, tight and precise, woven together like a basket made by a machine that dreamed in sacred math. I knelt and touched it. It didn't feel like grass anymore. It felt finished. Like it had been crafted, not grown. No tracks. No tire marks. No footprints. Just that perfect, terrible message, written in a language no man speaks. I stood there feeling like I'd walked into a church where God never came home. I wasn't supposed to see this. That thought burrowed in deep. This wasn't for me. And yet somehow, I knew I was the only one who had. The only one meant to. And I had no clue what it meant, just that it was part of something bigger, older, and hungrier than anything I'd ever known. And it had chosen my land to whisper its secrets. After that, the nights got longer. I wasn't just watching the dark anymore, I was waiting for it to blink first. Every sunset felt like a dare. I'd sit out on the porch with my rifle, same spot, same posture, like maybe routine could hold back the chaos. But deep down I knew I wasn't guarding the land no more. I was studying it. Trying to understand what it had become. Weeks passed. No more dead cattle. No more lights. Just the kind of uneasy quiet that wraps around you like a snake, slow, tight, always squeezing. Then one night, it changed. It was hot, too hot for October. The air was thick, hanging heavy like soup in your lungs. I must have dozed off, 'cause I woke with a start. Not from a sound, but a feeling. A low hum, deep and steady, like a diesel engine idling somewhere far off but buzzing straight through my bones. My teeth ached. My dogs were gone. Not barking, not whining. Just gone. I stood up slow and looked toward the south pasture, and that's when I saw it. Hanging in the sky was a shape that shouldn't have been there. A triangle. Not lit up, not glowing, just absence. A patch of sky where the stars were gone. A void darker than the night around it, hanging dead still above the field like a godless monument. No sound. No breeze. Just that hum pressing in on my skull. And then a light dropped down from the tip of the triangle, a pale green beam, soft but sickly, like swamp gas through a stained glass window. It landed on one of my cows. She stiffened, legs locked, head tilted like she was trying to scream but couldn't. And then, slow as a dream, she lifted. No noise. No resistance. Just up, weightless, into the belly of that black thing. My hands gripped the rifle, but I didn't raise it. What was the point? I wasn't looking at a thief I could shoot, I was watching something take what it wanted like it always had. And once it had her, the light vanished. The triangle hung there another beat, like it was checking to see if I understood. Then it blinked out. Gone. Like it had never been. And just like that, the stars were back. The hum faded. The wind returned, soft through the grass, pretending like nothing had happened. I stood there long after, knees locked, breath shallow, rifle useless in my hands. I'd seen it. The butcher. The thing that moved in silence and carved in geometry. It wasn't a ghost or a story. It was real. And it had just looked me in the eye. The next morning, the sun came up like it always does, pretending the world hadn't shifted sideways in the night. I tried to go about my chores, tried to act like things were normal. But normal was dead and buried somewhere out by the north tank. I was fixing a busted trough when I saw it, dust rising slow from the long road up to the house. Not ranch dust, not neighbor dust. Government dust. Black sedan, clean and shiny, crawling over the prairie like a beetle dragging secrets. Two men stepped out, wearing suits too dark for Texas heat and shoes too clean for real work. They looked like they'd walked off a TV set. One was tall, square-jawed, hair slicked back like a preacher with something to sell. The other didn't talk. Just watched. "You the property owner?" the tall one asked, voice flat as dry dirt. "Reckon I am," I said, leaning on a fence post, letting my shirt soak up the sweat. "We're with the Department of Energy," he said. Lie number 1. "We had some reports of unusual atmospheric activity out this way last night. Did you see anything?" I looked him in the eye, steady and slow. I thought about that black triangle, about the cow floating up like a balloon, about the sound that buzzed my teeth. But I also looked at his shoes, at how he didn't blink, and at the car behind him, still running, still waiting. "Can't say I did," I said. "Quiet night. Nothing but stars." He stared at me a moment longer than he needed to. Gave a tight smile that never reached his eyes, the kind of smile men give when they're carrying loaded questions and hidden threats. "All right then, sir. Thank you for your time." They turned, climbed back in that black car, and rolled off, leaving a trail of dust and the kind of silence that don't settle easy. And that was when I felt a different kind of fear. Not the fear of the unknown. The fear of men who know too much. The kind that don't knock twice. After those men drove off, the land went quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the empty, watchful hush from before, but a heavy stillness like the earth was carrying a secret it didn't know how to bury. The big, obvious stuff stopped. No more lights. No more missing cattle. No more shapes in the sky. But the wrongness stayed. It settled in the soil, in the shadows, in the corners of my eyes when I turned too fast. Weeks passed. Then months. The seasons turned like they always do, but I didn't feel time moving. Just that wait. Every now and then, something would happen. Just enough to let me know it wasn't over. One night I heard a sound high and thin, like a hammer tapping on a railroad spike, way off in the distance. Just once. Then nothing. Another time, I saw lights like fireflies zip along the fence line. But they weren't bugs. They moved too fast, too straight. Dippin', hoverin', dartin' from post to post like they were tucking inventory. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with that hum again, low and deep, but gone before I could sit up. My dogs never came back to normal. They sleep inside now. Refuse to go out after dark. And me? I still sit on the porch some nights, rifle in my lap, eyes on the horizon. But I know better now. The thing I'm waiting for don't care about bullets or fences or men like me. It's out there. Still watching. Still comin'. Just talking its time. I still go to church on Sundays. Still shake the preacher's hand, not along to talk of sin and salvation, of demons and angels battlin' in the hearts of men. But when I sit in that wooden pew and close my eyes, what I see ain't fire and brimstone. It's a black triangle hangin' silent in the night. It circles in my field and cattle that don't bleed. I pray on it. I do. But this don't feel like the devil the good book warned me about. This ain't loud or wrathful. It's quiet. Precise. Mechanical. Like it's just doing a job I ain't meant to understand. Sometimes I tell myself maybe it's the government. Some secret project, some spycraft I'm not supposed to know about. But if that's true, why the games? Why the silence? Why not just fence off the land and be done with it? No, this thing, it's older than men. Older than language. And I think maybe it's always been here, waiting for the world to forget how to see it. I don't know what I'm fastened. Don't know what it wants. All I know is I ain't the same man I was before the silence started. That's why I made this recording. Not for sympathy. Not for answers. Just so I ain't alone in this. If you've heard that silence, if you've seen lights moving wrong, if you found things on your land that don't bleed and don't leave tracks, I want to hear from you. I need to. Because I'm just an old rancher in West Texas, sitting under stars that don't feel like mine anymore. And I need to know I ain't the only one. Please, tell me I ain't the only one. Story 4. I've always been a seeker. Not of money, or power, or recognition. I was never drawn to anything that glittered in the light. What I wanted, the only thing I've ever wanted, was the truth. The kind that doesn't shine but whispers from the cracks in old wood, the truth scrawled in dead languages on crumbling parchment. Magic. Not the kind you see in movies, not the wands and glowing circles and enchanted swords. I'm talking about the real thing. The dark thing. The hidden mechanisms of the world, buried under centuries of dogma and dust. Witchcraft. Goetia. Theurgy. Demonology. I've lived in pursuit of that knowledge for as long as I can remember. My apartment is more a tomb of paper than a home. Floor-to-ceiling stacks of leather-bound volumes, fragile pamphlets, pages stitched together by monks who feared what they were preserving. Every penny I earned from my soul-numbing day job went into that obsession. I didn't just collect books, I hunted them. I own a translated fragment of the Shams al-Ma'arif, weathered and incomplete. I've pored over the fire and brimstone rhetoric of the Malleus Maleficarum. I've traced my fingers across sigils from the Lesser Key of Solomon and spent sleepless nights decoding the rituals in the Book of Abramelin. I know the names. I know the symbols. I know what binds and what releases. I know which demon rules over love, over war, over madness, over hunger. My knowledge is vast. And yet, for all of it, it's always been theoretical. I've tried. God knows I've tried. Evocations whispered at midnight, circles drawn in salt and chalk, invocations offered to a dark, silent ceiling. And silence was all I ever received in return. No shadow moved that shouldn't. No chill passed down my spine. No voice answered. My failure wasn't in understanding, it was in connection. I was like an engineer with blueprints for an impossible engine, but no fuel, no ignition. No spark. I began to think it was all myth. Beautiful, elaborate systems built by desperate minds reaching into darkness and pulling out stories. And I was just another fool fumbling for ghosts in the static. I almost gave up. I almost stopped looking. Almost. Until I found the book. It happened by accident. Not in some moonlit graveyard or blood-slick basement, but in the dry, fluorescent quiet of a public library. I wasn't even looking for anything occult. I was chasing a footnote in an unrelated text, something academic, something dull, and I took a wrong turn. The stacks grew older as I walked, less organized. I found myself in a forgotten wing labeled Archaic Philology, which may as well have read Abandoned. The air there felt different, thicker, stiller. The kind of quiet that makes you feel watched, even when you're alone. The shelves were dusty, unkempt. Some books leaned, some had collapsed entirely. And then, without knowing why, my eyes locked onto a book lying horizontally across the top of a row. No title. No markings. Just a plain slab of deep maroon leather, oddly smooth, oddly warm. I reached out and lifted it. It was heavier than it should have been. The cover had no lettering, no emblem, no indication of author or publisher. Inside, the pages were thick, like vellum. The writing was done by hand, elegant, sharp cursive in faded brown ink. It had no library card, no barcode, no record. It didn't officially exist. I should have reported it, maybe, or at least told a librarian. But something inside me, something deeper than thought, refused. I sat down right there on the dusty floor and opened to the first page. And within minutes, I knew this book was different. It didn't hedge its ideas in allegory or mysticism. It didn't veil its meanings with vague metaphors or cryptic verse. It explained, plainly and clearly, the structure of reality as layers, membranes that vibrate, overlap, and thin in certain places. And magic, it said, was simply learning how to resonate correctly. It wasn't a philosophy. It was a manual. The more I read, the more I felt it, that sensation of sudden, staggering recognition. It was like reading the instruction manual for a machine I'd only ever guessed at by touching buttons and wires in the dark. This was what I'd been looking for. The missing link between theory and application. The bridge between ritual and result. And then I understood I couldn't leave this book behind. It wasn't in the system, anyway. No records. No ID. I hesitated only a moment before sliding it into my bag. The weight of it against my side as I walked out felt illicit, like I'd stolen something holy or cursed. But I couldn't let it go. Not after everything. I needed to know what it knew. Back in my apartment, I devoured it. Page after page, sleepless night after sleepless night. It reframed demons not as cartoonish villains, but as entities from adjacent realities, pure intent given shape. They were drawn not by smoke or blood, but by frequency. By will. By focus. Rituals weren't about candles or robes. They were about resonance. I had finally found the signal hidden beneath all the noise. And buried within the book's precise, methodical guidance was one small chapter. One phrase that would change everything. Reciprocal observation. It was late, sometime between 2 and 3 in the morning, when I reached the chapter. My eyes were sore, my head buzzing with concepts I hadn't yet fully processed, but I couldn't stop. Not with the book open in front of me, alive beneath my hands. The chapter was short, tucked between longer discussions about resonance and threshold theory. Its title was unassuming, typed in neat block letters, on reciprocal observation. The text leading into it was deceptively simple. It stated, matter-of-factly, that in order to perceive an entity from an adjacent membrane, the entity must first perceive you. The act of observation, it said, was inherently mutual. You cannot see without being seen. That was the risk. That was the invitation. And then came a small, indented paragraph set apart from the rest. It read, the following passage, when read aloud with sincere intent, will create a resonance sufficient to attract the attention of a nearby, non-corporeal entity. It will summon a demon. Read it at your own risk. I stared at that line for a long time, feeling an old, familiar skepticism creeping in. Read at your own risk. How many times had I seen that phrase or something like it? It was a trope, a prop, a stage flourish. It reeked of the melodramatic nonsense I'd long since grown tired of, the kind meant to impress teenagers who thought chanting in Latin would make their bedroom lamps flicker. But this book had never lied to me. It had never played dress up. Every word so far had been surgical. Precise. This was the first sign of pageantry. And yet, I was tired. Tired of theory. Tired of empty circles and unanswered invocations. I didn't believe it would work, but I needed to try. One more time. One last time. I sat back, cleared my throat, and focused. Not theatrically, not the kind of focus you fake to look dramatic, but a deep, clear intent. Like tuning a radio to a frequency I didn't know I could hear. I read the words aloud, each syllable feeling strangely smooth on my tongue. That which is without may now be within. The door that is closed is the door that is open. I see you. See me. That was it. Just 4 short lines. My voice felt small in the apartment's silence, like tossing a pebble into a dry well. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. A full minute. And nothing happened. No shudder in the air. No shift in light. No crawling sensation at the base of my spine. Just the same stale quiet I'd lived with for years. I felt foolish. I sighed, leaned back, rubbed at my eyes. Another dead end. Another beautiful, thrilling, brilliant theory that led nowhere. I had followed every instruction to the letter. I had spoken with intent. And once again, the silence mocked me. It was always just silence. The knock came just as I was pushing the book away. 3 solid raps on the front door. Not loud, not frantic. Just deliberate. Measured. So ordinary that, for a second, I didn't register it as strange. And then my entire body tensed. It was nearly 2 in the morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. I never had visitors, certainly not unannounced, not at this hour. My apartment building was quiet. Private. I lived alone by design. I stayed still, listening. Another knock didn't follow. Just those 3, echoing now in the silence like a ripple that refused to fade. My thoughts scattered. Could it be a neighbor? An emergency? Maybe someone was locked out or confused about the floor. But even as those explanations floated through my mind, something colder was rising beneath them. Something ancient and quiet that whispered no. No, this was not coincidence. I got up, slowly, legs stiff, heart heavy. I walked to the door. My hand hovered over the knob. I leaned in and looked through the peephole. Nothing. No one. The hallway outside was empty, lit by that flickering, jaundiced fluorescent that always made everything look sick. I opened the door. I don't know why I did it. Instinct, maybe. Habit. Arrogance. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it really was nothing, that I hadn't just spoken an invitation into the dark. I stepped out, glanced left, then right. The hallway stretched out in silence. The elevator was still. All doors closed. No movement. Not even a sound. A prank, I thought. Just kids. I closed the door and locked it again, the deadbolt sliding into place with a metallic thud. I turned back toward the table, toward the book. My pulse still hadn't returned to normal. And then I saw it. A line. A single line of text I hadn't read earlier. It sat directly beneath the invocation, so plain and unassuming that my eyes had skimmed right past it. I read it once. Then again. And again. Please, when the door knocks, do not open it. Do not open it for any reason. Do not open it under any circumstances. It must be invited. Do not invite it in. My breath caught in my throat. My chest felt hollow. The meaning of those words fell into me like a stone into a well, slow, heavy, impossible to stop. I had opened the door. I had invited it. Not metaphorically. Not spiritually. Physically. The knock had come, and I had answered. My heartbeat felt wrong, too fast, too loud. The air in the room had shifted, thicker now, weighted. A presence. Something had entered. And I had let it. I haven't moved since I read that line. I'm still in the chair, staring at the book, unable to touch it, unable to close it, as if doing so would somehow seal my fate. The air in the room is no longer just air, it has weight now, like a damp wool blanket pressing against my skin. The silence isn't empty anymore. It's crowded. Watchful. It feels exactly like the silence of a room after someone walks in and doesn't say a word. I haven't turned around. I don't need to. I can feel it. Standing there. Behind me. Still as death. Waiting. Watching. The words keep repeating in my head, it must be invited. Do not invite it in. But I did. God help me, I did. I didn't believe. I thought it was superstition, the same tired theater every grimy occult book throws at you. I thought I was immune. But the knock wasn't symbolic. It was literal. The boundary between our realities, whatever membranes the book described, had thinned, and something had come to the threshold. And I opened the door. I didn't just break a rule. I broke a law. Something ancient. Something fundamental. And now it's in here. Not in the sense of haunting or lingering energy. No. It's physically here. Somewhere in this room. Maybe not bound by walls or angles the way I am, but present. Occupying space. I want to run, but I can't feel my legs. I want to scream, but my throat is locked tight, as if sound might provoke it. I can't look behind me. I know what I'll see. Or worse, what I won't. A shadow without shape. A presence without form. A being made of pure attention. That's what the book said, isn't it? That these things aren't demons with horns and tails, but entities of intent, conscious will drawn by resonance. It knows I see it. And now it sees me. I don't know if it's bound to my apartment or to me. I don't know if I can ever be alone again. Maybe I've tuned myself to a frequency I can never untune. Maybe this thing will follow me everywhere now, in every mirror, every darkened corner, every whisper of silence that suddenly feels too full. I don't know what it wants. Maybe nothing. Maybe just to watch. Or maybe it waits for something else, for a second mistake. A second invitation. And I'm terrified I won't know I'm giving it until it's too late. So I'm writing this now, in the moments I still can, to anyone who might understand. If you know this kind of magic, if you've ever crossed that veil and lived to tell about it, please, tell me what to do. Is there a reversal? A binding? A banishment? Or have I opened something that can't be closed? The silence is thickening again. The air tastes wrong. And I swear, I can feel breath against the back of my neck. Please, don't let this be the last thing I ever write. Story 5. I don't really know what I'm looking for by saying this out loud. Maybe it's advice. Maybe I want someone to tell me I'm not crazy. Or maybe I just need to convince myself that I haven't completely unraveled. It started 5 nights ago, give or take. I was up late, too wired to sleep, digging through this old Discord server I hadn't checked in years. It used to be a place where people dumped obscure horror games, lost media, creepypasta type content. Most of it was junk, unfinished school projects, joke mods, stuff meant to be edgy but forgettable. But one post caught my eye. No flair. No message history. Just a single file. A zip named final.exe. No notes. No preview. Just that one sentence beneath it, "Don't share this." I should have deleted it. Hell, I knew I should have. But I've always had a weakness for this kind of thing. Weird horror files are my thing. So I downloaded it. No password. Inside was the executable, no splash screen, no dev logo, just static. Then blackness. Then a single line in dull white text, "You clicked it." And then I was in. If you can even call it a game. First person. Grainy PS1 style textures. A dim hallway stretched ahead with doors on either side. The sound was muffled, like I was wearing headphones underwater. The textures glitched every few steps, jittery VHS tracking lines, looping corners like a haunted maze generator. I've seen that kind of aesthetic before. It was familiar in a nostalgic way. Until the fourth loop. That's when I realized something was off. The hallway looked too familiar. Not just in style. I froze in place, heart pounding, suddenly sweating like I'd run a marathon. It wasn't fear, not at first, just confusion. A slow, rising unease. Then I saw it. The floor. The light fixture. The paint chip on the hallway wall I'd been meaning to fix for months. It was my apartment. Exactly. Every scuffed baseboard. Every misplaced hoodie. Every shadow cast where it shouldn't be. Somehow, this low-poly horror game had rendered a perfect, distorted version of my home. I thought maybe it was pulling live feed from my camera. I scrambled to check, but the webcam light was off. I unplugged it anyway. The game didn't care. It kept going. I mashed escape. Alt F4. Nothing. Even Task Manager refused to open. Then something appeared, a mirror at the far end of the hall. My reflection. Sort of. It looked like me, but wrong. The face moved out of sync. Blinked when I didn't. Smiled, but I wasn't smiling. Then more text appeared. Don't lie to them. The screen froze. Went black. I shut the PC down the hard way, handshaking so badly I had to hold the power button twice. When I turned it back on the next day, there was no desktop. Just the game. Still running. No icons. No taskbar. Just the hallway. I didn't touch it. I left the apartment that night. Stayed at a friend's place. I didn't tell him the whole story. Just said I needed space. But that didn't stop it. Because when I opened my laptop, not the same device, not even the same drive, the game was there. Already running. No install. No files. Just there. That night, my phone buzzed at exactly 3:17 a.m. No name. No number. Just a blank notification. When I tapped it open, all I heard was static. And under the static, whispering. Fast. Low. Like someone speaking from inside the pillow next to my head. I didn't sleep. I watched the walls. The corners. The shadows behind the closet door. And I swear I could feel something watching me back. Not paranoia. Not anxiety. Literal, crawling awareness. Something studying me. And last night, it got worse. Because when the screen lit up again, still that same cursed game, it wasn't my apartment anymore. It was my friend's guest room. Same comforter. Same warped desk lamp. Same tangled phone charger I dropped near the outlet. It showed the bed. It showed me. Asleep. From above. There is no camera in the ceiling. I checked. I ripped the tiles down just to be sure. I've wiped every drive. Deleted everything. Did a full reinstall of the OS. It still comes back. Different machines. Different networks. Doesn't matter. It follows. And I think it's learning. Every night, the texts come. 317, static. Then silence. Then whispers. And the messages in the game keep changing. Last time, it said, "Can I come in?" I didn't touch anything. Didn't click. Didn't breathe. Then new text appeared. I already did. I don't think it wants me to play anymore. I think it's playing me. And the worst part? I'm starting to forget what my real home looked like. The game's version is sharper now in my mind. More real. More alive. And when I close my eyes, I don't see black. I see that hallway. Looping. Glitching. Waiting. And the reflection, still smiling. Still not blinking with me. And I think next time it will move. Story 6. It always began the same way. Every night, at exactly 8:57, he walked in, the man in the brown coat. I never heard the bell above the door. Never heard footsteps. Just the faint change in the air, like the room exhaled, and suddenly he was there. I'd be halfway through my closing routine, rag in one hand, mop bucket idle by the back door, a tired jazz track barely whispering through the speakers. And then I'd look up and he'd be standing there. Always still. Always watching. He never smiled. Never greeted me. Just approached the counter with the same quiet intensity, ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and stood holding the cup for a long time before saying anything. Sometimes he'd mumble strange things under his breath. One night he said it tasted like rainwater drained from an empty grave. Another, like a house burning from the inside out. I tried to laugh, make it a joke, but his eyes never changed. Just fixed on something far away. Then he'd sit, always at the same booth near the window, staring into nothing like he was waiting for someone. Or something. A week in, he brought a woman with him. She looked like she'd been wrung out by time and weather, canvas coat, frayed hair, eyes too wide, too alert, like she was constantly bracing for impact. She didn't order anything. Just wandered slowly around the cafe, trailing her fingers along the edges of the walls, pausing at old framed menus or curling bits of wallpaper like she was mapping the space by touch. When I asked if she needed anything, she smiled too hard and said, "No thank you. I'm just here for Pendleton." That was the first time I heard his name. I hadn't asked. I never did. He said it like a shrug. I was Pendleton before I forgot who I was, he told me once. Macy never forgot. I didn't know what the hell that meant. I was tired, underpaid, and already on edge from the weird vibe they brought in with them. But he leaned in real close then, his breath thick with stale cigarettes and something that made my stomach turn, and whispered, "That's why she's so dangerous." From that point on, they were a routine. Macy and Pendleton. The strange couple who never spoke to each other, never touched their drinks, never seemed to blink. Always in that same booth, every night at 8:57. Pendleton would tap his fingers softly against his mug like he was keeping time. Macy would tilt her head and whisper into the air like she was listening to voices only she could hear. Then others started showing up with them. A boy, barely 16, ordered nothing but hot water and stared into the steam like he was watching someone drown. A woman in business clothes who lined up 3 lattes, whispering something into each one as if apologizing. A barefoot man with bloodied palms who squinted at the nutritional chart on a milk carton like it held a prophecy. They never spoke to me unless they had to. But I started noticing things. The clocks would stutter at exactly 9:03, the second hand would tremble in place. Not tick. Just vibrate like it was being held back. The lights dimmed, not flickered, just dimmed, like the room was falling asleep. The air grew thick and warm. My ears would pop like we were changing elevation. And every single one of them, would freeze. No movement. No sound. Just stillness, like statues waiting for permission to exist. One night, I dropped a glass. It shattered behind the counter, and when I stood back up, Macy was right in front of me. No footsteps. No warning. Just there. Inches from my face. Her breath smelled like wet fabric and dying flowers. She looked at me like I was something she'd lost a long time ago. "You see it now," she said, soft and certain. I didn't respond. Couldn't. My throat had dried up. She turned and returned to the booth without another word. Pendleton looked at me then, raised his cup in a slow toast. I don't think he drank from it. After that night, I started locking the doors early. 8:55 sharp. Lights off. Chairs up. I'd pretend we were closed. But it didn't matter. They still came. Sometimes they were already inside when I turned around. Sometimes I'd find them sitting in shadows that hadn't existed seconds before. They didn't knock. Didn't ask. Just appeared. Macy began whispering to the espresso machine. Her lips inches from the steam wand, which hissed in reply like it understood her. Pendleton wrote on napkins and tucked them under the lids at the condiment bar. One night I found one. I wish I hadn't. It read, "When the coffee cools, you'll remember where the body is." I threw it away. Then checked the freezer. Just in case. A few days later, Tuesday, I think, they brought me a key. Pendleton placed it on the counter, silent. Brass. Worn. Cold to the touch, even though he'd just held it. Macy didn't blink. "You'll need it," she said. "The real door is behind the freezer. When the shop turns inside out, it's the only way to close it." I asked what the hell she meant. She just looked at me like the question had missed the point entirely. Pendleton finally spoke. "You only get one chance. Don't waste it." They left without another word. I didn't watch them go. Since then, the key has stayed in my coat pocket. I haven't been sleeping. At 9:03 each night, my apartment lights dim just like the cafe used to. The air gets heavy. The mirrors fog up. My phone glitches, flickering between static and silence, like it's reaching for a signal that doesn't exist. And sometimes, there's a knock. Behind the fridge. Always just one. Always soft. Always waiting. I know it's not the fridge. I don't open it when that happens. I don't move. I just sit. I listen. And I remember the napkin. The coffee. The trembling second hand. The faces of people who never blink. If Macy was right, the door is waking up. And I'm the one holding the key. I think about what Pendleton said about only getting one chance. And what happens if I wait too long? I don't know what's on the other side. I don't know if closing the door will be enough. But I do know something's coming. Something patient. And very, very close. So I sit in the dark. I watch the clock. When it hits 9:03, I stop breathing. I listen. And I pray that tonight, the knock doesn't come. Story 7. I met my best friend Jacob when I was 12. 6th grade. New school. New town. I was the kid you'd forget after 5 seconds, a pale, lanky, acne-ridden blob with a backpack too big for my frame and a voice too quiet to matter. I kept to myself, mostly. For months, I sat alone at lunch, walked the halls like a ghost, and counted the minutes in every class like I was waiting for a prison bell to ring. My mom noticed, of course. She always noticed. She said she was worried I was wilting. That's the word she used, wilting, like some sad little flower with too much shade and no soil. So she forced me to go to the middle school dance. Said it might help me sprout. I didn't sprout. I sat at a corner table with a cup of off-brand Kool-Aid and the smallest bag of chips I'd ever seen. The music was too loud, the lights too bright, and every laugh that echoed across the gym felt like it was aimed at me. Then, he sat down. No introduction. Just plopped down like he'd been sitting there all along. He didn't look at me, not directly. Just muttered something under his breath and pointed at my faded Sans t-shirt. "I like Undertale too," he said. That was it. That was all it took. After that night, Jacob and I were inseparable. Weekends? Hours. Sleepovers? Constant. Shared notebooks full of comics and made-up games? Endless. My mom adored him. She'd make pancakes when he stayed over and even talked to his mom for hours when she dropped him off. Sometimes, I think she liked Jacob's mom more than she liked anyone else in town. We were happy. I was happy. And I don't mean that fake kind of happy kids sometimes pretend to be. I mean really happy. Pure. Unfiltered. Stupid, maybe, but real. There was no weight yet. No shadow. Just video games, dumb inside jokes, and summer afternoons with too much sun. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time in my life I'd ever feel that way. That version of me, smiling, safe, small, died the day we decided to go to that place. And everything that came after was just the echo. It started with a video. One of those grainy, overexposed YouTube clips made by guys who call themselves urban explorers but really just sneak into places they shouldn't. We were sitting in my dad's old study after school, the desktop humming like it was running on fumes, watching someone's shaky flashlight beam sweep over a crumbling hallway lined with lockers. The camera panned up to a rusted sign, Ridgeview Elementary. Jacob leaned forward. "That's here," he said. And he was right. That abandoned school in the video? It was maybe half a mile past the woods behind our own school, the woods we walked past every day. The video mentioned rumors. Stories about kids disappearing back when the school was still open. Nothing concrete, just whispers. Supposedly, Ridgeview was shut down after 3 students vanished in 1 year, and the district didn't want the publicity. They sealed the building. Left it to rot. And that was enough for us. In our 12-year-old brains, it wasn't just a dead school, it was a mystery waiting to be solved. We thought we'd be the ones to uncover something big. A hidden room. A message left behind. Something worth recording, worth remembering. So we made a plan. A good one, or so we thought. We told our parents we were walking to Main Street after school to get pizza. Small town. Nobody questioned it. Jacob's mom was scheduled to pick us up outside Pizza Hut at 7. That gave us 4 full hours. 4 hours to get to Ridgeview, explore, and get out. Instead of our usual school stuff, we packed flashlights, spare batteries, water bottles, snacks, most of which we'd never touch. We left our backpacks in our lockers and slipped out after the final bell. No one stopped us. No one noticed. It was easy. Too easy. The woods behind the school weren't thick, just tangled enough to make you itchy and regret wearing shorts. We laughed at ourselves as we fought through the underbrush. Jacob started making howling noises like a werewolf, and I joined in, both of us trying to spook the other until we were just giggling messes, breathless from our own jokes. That was the last time either of us laughed that day. We saw strange things on the way, things I've never told anyone about. First, a campsite. It looked old, abandoned, but not that old. Torn tent, scattered beer cans, a half-burned log still arranged like a fire pit. We didn't touch it. Even back then, we knew better than to mess with something that might still belong to someone. Then, deeper into the woods, a deer stand. Rickety, hand-built, half-rotten. I dared Jacob to climb it. He pretended to resist, but you could see he wanted to. Step by shaky step, he climbed to the top, the wooden ladder groaning beneath his sneakers. "I can see the school," he shouted from the top. Then he went quiet. "There's binoculars up here." He picked them up and pressed them to his eyes. Dude, I can see the buses leaving our school. I can see Mrs. D's classroom. He sounded amazed. Triumphant. When he climbed down, slowly, carefully, he kept the binoculars. Tucked them into his hoodie pocket like they belonged to him now. I didn't argue. I should've, but I didn't. It wasn't long before we reached Ridgeview. Funny thing is, we didn't even see it at first. It just appeared. One moment it was trees and vines and silence, and the next, we were standing in front of a brick wall choked with ivy and rot. It looked like the woods were trying to eat the building. We found a window, pressed our faces against the dirty glass. Inside, desks were overturned, books scattered, a shelf lying face down in stagnant water. The air behind the glass looked thick, like it hadn't moved in years. We couldn't open the window. It was rusted shut. But further along the wall, we found something worse. A door. It was already open, just slightly, but held there by a cinder block. Jacob looked at me, his grin nervous. "It's like it's waiting for us," he said. I laughed, but only on the outside. Because deep down, I had the same thought. Doors don't hold themselves open. Something put that block there. Something or someone. But we stepped through anyway. The air inside Ridgeview was thick, stale, and oddly warm, like the whole building had been sealed off from time. We stepped into what looked like the teacher's lounge, old tables pushed against the wall, half-collapsed chairs, a water cooler long emptied and tipped on its side. We didn't speak. Not really. We just exchanged glances, silent smiles that said we're doing it, this is real. Jacob found a mug that said "World's Best Teacher" and pretended to sip from it with his pinky out. I laughed, a real laugh, but something about the sound felt wrong in that space. Too loud. Too alive. We left the lounge and slipped into the hallway beyond. The floor creaked beneath our shoes, echoing off locker doors left ajar. The paint peeled in long, curling strips from the ceiling. Water stains bled like bruises down the walls. But more than that, there was a feeling, a pressure. Like the whole place was watching. I shook it off. We moved quietly past a row of classrooms, our flashlight beams jittering over posters, faded artwork, dusty bulletin boards. One of the rooms had a door half open. Jacob nudged it with his foot, and it swung wide, groaning as it scraped the tile. The classroom inside looked almost untouched. Desks arranged in imperfect rows. A chalkboard still filled with equations and vocabulary words. Toys littered one corner, blocks, plastic dinosaurs, a single deflated dodgeball. We were about to move on when we heard it. A bang. Loud. Sharp. Behind us. We turned so fast our lights jerked wildly across the walls. One of the classroom doors at the end of the hallway had slammed open, slowly hitting the wall beside it like it had been nudged, gently, deliberately. We stood frozen. Jacob whispered, "Wind?" I shook my head. The air was still. Too still. Jacob picked up a book from a nearby desk, holding it like a weapon. He crept toward the open door, the soles of his sneakers squeaking against the tile. I followed. Every step felt too loud. At the doorway, Jacob reared back, ready to throw the book at whatever waited inside. But when he looked in, he stopped. "Nothing," he said. I peeked over his shoulder. He was right. The room was empty. Same as the others. Same old decay. Same eerie stillness. But in the far corner, something caught my eye. A large metal filing cabinet, rusted but upright. Behind it, just barely visible, was a hole. A small one. We hurried over, shoving desks aside. The filing cabinet didn't move much, but just enough for us to peer into the gap behind it. At first, we thought it might be treasure, or a stash, or something cool. But what we saw was clothes. Just clothes. Small ones. Folded and stuffed deep into the cavity of the wall. Jackets. Backpacks. Even shoes. We didn't speak. Not for a long time. Eventually, Jacob muttered, "Maybe someone was hiding here." I nodded, but I didn't believe it. I don't think he did either. The feeling in the room shifted after that. Something heavy settled in our chests. We left the classroom without saying another word, walking a little faster than before. We passed more rooms. Most were ruined, collapsed ceilings, moldy carpets, cracked windows. But the silence held. That suffocating, unnatural silence. Then, at the far end of the hallway, we found it. The gymnasium doors. Big. Steel. Rusted shut. We pressed our shoulders to them, straining, and finally they groaned open just wide enough to slip through. Inside, the gym was massive, bigger than ours by far. The floor was dusty, but still intact. Bleachers folded in, scoreboard still bolted to the wall, though dark. Jacob whistled. "It's like a tomb," he said. I dared him to race me across it, needing to shake off the fear. We ran. Or tried. Neither of us made it halfway before collapsing in a pile of sweat and wheezing breath. We laughed. Kind of. But the laughter didn't echo. It just died. Like everything else in that place. We crossed the gym slowly now, stepping over faded court lines and abandoned basketballs softened by time. At the back, a small doorway led to what must have been the coach's office. The blinds on its little square window were still shut, dust gathering in the folds like dead skin. Jacob reached for the handle, and it turned with a soft click. Unlocked. The air inside felt different. Cooler. More still. We stepped in and the first thing I noticed was how untouched it looked. Like someone had left for lunch and just never came back. A desk sat in the center of the room, magazines still stacked on its surface, a mug beside them filled halfway with water. Not murky water. Not rainwater. Clean. Clear. Fresh. My throat went dry. Jacob didn't notice. He was already moving around the office, peering behind the shelves, flipping through papers. Then he called me over, his voice bright with something close to glee. "Dude, check this out." He stood next to a small cot, a sleeping bag, unzipped, splayed open like someone had just climbed out of it. One of the corners was still indented with a head shape. The air around it smelled faintly like shampoo. "What kind of teacher sleeps in his office?" he asked, laughing nervously. But I wasn't laughing. My eyes were on the sleeping bag, the magazines, the water. "Jacob," I said, but I didn't know what I was going to say. Because then we heard it. A sound. Quiet. Out of place. Footsteps. Soft, careful ones. Coming closer. The laugh died in Jacob's throat. He looked at me and I looked at him, and for the first time since we stepped into Ridgeview, I saw the fear fully bloom on his face. Real fear. Not the kind you fake when you tell ghost stories. We didn't speak. He grabbed my arm and pulled me across the room to a supply closet. It was barely big enough for the two of us, and when the door shut behind us, we were submerged in pitch black. I fumbled with my backpack, shaking hands digging for my flashlight. My breath was too loud. Jacob's was silent. I finally found the flashlight, clicked it on, nothing. Dead. I slapped it. Hard. Once. Twice. Then light. A narrow, trembling beam cutting through the dark. I turned, instinctively stepping back, and that's when I felt it. A snap beneath my foot. A crack. Not of wood. Not of plastic. Something softer. I pointed the flashlight down. And I saw it. A leg bone. Small. Fragile. Splintered beneath my sneaker. My heart stuttered. I dragged the light upward and there it was, the body. A child. Curled on its side like it had been trying to sleep. Flesh clung in torn, rotting patches to gray bone. The clothes were soaked in brown-red stains, stiff with dried blood and something else. The head was ruined. Caved in. Skin shredded and fused to broken skull like meat left too long in the sun. I opened my mouth and a scream came out, jagged and raw. It tore through the darkness like an alarm. Jacob grabbed me, both hands, shaking me, whispering shut up shut up shut up, but it felt far away, muffled. Then I heard it. Outside the door. Fast. Heavy. Footsteps, no longer soft. No longer sneaking. Running. Charging. We had seconds. Jacob threw the door open and the light from the hallway spilled in. I saw him then. The man. The thing. Staggering back, just outside the doorway. Tall. Broad. Covered in filth. He didn't shout. He didn't speak. He let out a guttural, wet grunt that didn't sound human. Didn't even sound alive. Then he lunged. We bolted. No words. No plan. Just motion. Pure panic. Our feet pounded the gym floor, every slap of sneaker against wood sounding like a countdown. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could hear him behind us, the thing. That thing. His breath came in ragged gasps, wet and heavy like lungs filled with something rotten. Jacob was ahead of me for a second, then behind. Then beside me again. We didn't scream anymore. We didn't even breathe. We tore through the gym doors, back into the hallways that suddenly felt longer than before. My flashlight beam jumped and jerked across the walls, catching glimpses of familiar decay that now looked monstrous. Lockers leaned in like teeth. The shadows moved when we weren't looking. When we reached the corridor that led back toward the teacher's lounge, I realized I couldn't hear Jacob's steps anymore. I turned my head, just a glance, and saw him crumpled on the ground a few yards behind me. His face twisted in pain, his hands gripping his foot. Blood was blooming beneath him. Jacob! I shouted, already slowing. I turned to run to him, but I froze. He'd stepped on something. A nail. Rusted, long, and cruel, sticking up from a rotted board like a trap. It had pierced straight through his shoe, through his foot, and the blood was spreading too fast. He was crying, teeth clenched so tight I thought they'd break, trying to pull the nail out without moving. That's when I heard it again. The sound. That grunt. Close. Too close. The thing was coming. Fast. Jacob's eyes met mine. Red, wide, terrified. Run, he whispered. I shook my head, a sob already forming in my throat. I took one step toward him, just one, but I couldn't move further. I was frozen. Anchored to the tile by fear. And then it happened. The creature reached Jacob. One arm, massive and stained, shot out and grabbed him by the wrist, lifting him from the floor like he weighed nothing. Jacob screamed, flailing, kicking, but the thing didn't even react. He held him there, suspended, like a hunter admiring a catch. I saw Jacob's face. I saw the horror twisted into something unrecognizable. A child's face that should have been playing games and laughing over pizza, now contorted in raw, silent agony. And I turned. I ran. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. Through the halls. Through the teacher's lounge. Through the open door still held by the cinder block. I didn't look back. Not once. I couldn't. If I had, I think something in me would have snapped in two. The woods outside were black now. Somehow, night had fallen like a curtain, and I hadn't even noticed. Branches tore at my arms. Roots caught at my shoes. I tripped. Fell. Got back up. My flashlight danced and bobbed wildly, casting sickening shadows between the trees. Every time I hit the ground, I thought I'd look up and see it there. Him. But I didn't. The woods were empty. Silent. I burst from the tree line near our school, and collapsed on the grass. My knees scraped raw, hands trembling. And then someone shouted my name. It was Mr. Henry, the bus driver and janitor. He ran to me, confusion shifting to concern as he saw the state I was in. He didn't ask questions. Just wrapped a jacket around my shoulders and called the police. When they came, when my mom arrived, when Jacob's mom stood there shaking, asking where her son was, I lied. I told them we got lost. I told them Jacob went one way, I went the other, and I couldn't find him. I couldn't say the truth. Not then. Not ever. Not until now. I kept the lie for years. I told it to the police. I told it to my mom. I told it to Jacob's mom as she cried on our couch, her hands clutching the blanket he used during sleepovers, still smelling like him. I watched her fall apart. Bit by bit. She used to smile like him, kind of crooked, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to, but that smile vanished after he disappeared. A year later, she was gone. Pills. Whiskey. Silence. They said it was grief. I knew it was guilt. I think she blamed herself, but she shouldn't have. It was me. I left him. I left him there. Every day since, I've seen his face in my dreams, twisting, begging, trapped in a memory I can't unsee. I told myself it was better this way. That no one would believe me. That no one should know what we found. And maybe I could have kept believing that. Maybe I could have kept the truth buried like the rest of Ridgeview. Until this morning. Until I turned on the TV and saw him. Jacob. On the news. They'd found his body. Deep in the woods, half buried in the ruins of that school. Mangled. Decomposed. Defiled. The anchor said remains consistent with prolonged captivity and blunt force trauma. But I didn't need the details. I already knew what they meant. I already saw it. I fell to my knees in front of the screen, screaming without sound. But then came the worst part. The part that broke me all over again. The reporter said the coroner had confirmed time of death. Recent. Within the last few months. Jacob was 16. That meant he'd been alive. For 4 years. For years in that place. For years after I left him. After I ran. After I told the world he was lost in the woods. I don't know what happened to him down there. I don't want to. But I know this, he didn't die when I thought he did. He survived. For a while. Maybe he screamed for me. Maybe he waited for someone to come back. Maybe every time the door creaked open, he thought it was me. I can't live with that. Not anymore. So I'm telling you. I'm telling whoever will listen. Not for forgiveness. Not even for truth. Just because if I carry this any longer, I think it'll kill me too. And maybe that's fair. Maybe that's what I deserve. Story 8. The air in the lab felt wrong that night, thicker, heavier, like it was watching me. I'd stayed late again, buried in data sets that refused to make sense, each number a whisper of something just beyond understanding. The hum of machines I'd grown so used to had vanished, leaving behind a silence so deep it pressed against my eardrums. I cracked my back, trying to shake off the fatigue clinging to my spine, when I noticed it, that soft, unnatural glow leaking out from beneath Dr. Erickson's office door. Blue, cold, and pulsing faintly like something alive. He had left hours ago. Everyone had. I was supposed to be alone. I stood, each step echoing too loudly down the hallway, my breath hitching as I neared the door. Something in me whispered to turn back, to leave it alone, but curiosity gnawed at that instinct until I found my hand trembling on the doorknob. The door creaked open, and what lay beyond twisted my stomach into knots. Dr. Erickson's perfectly ordered space was now chaos, papers scattered like leaves in a storm, his whiteboards defaced with symbols I couldn't decipher but somehow felt. The glow came from his desk, where a device the size of a grapefruit pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. It didn't belong here, not in any scientific discipline I knew. It hummed in the air, vibrating through my bones, and before I could stop myself, I was reaching out. My fingertips brushed the surface, and in that instant, reality fractured. A surge of electricity tore through me, and then there were images, landscapes that bent logic, machines that breathed, and eyes that watched me from places I couldn't name. And just like that, darkness. When I came to, 3 hours had vanished. The glow was gone. The device had vanished. Only a note remained, scrawled in Ericsson's unmistakable hand: "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. You were never supposed to see this. Run, before they find you too." I stepped into Dr. Ericsson's office and immediately felt something coil in my gut. This wasn't a break-in or an accident. This was deliberate. The room, once obsessively neat, looked like a storm had torn through it. Papers littered the floor like fallen feathers, and the whiteboards were no longer filled with equations or research notes but covered in symbols that seemed to move when I wasn't looking, shapes that pulled at the edges of my sanity, like I was remembering something I'd never learned. And then I saw it. Sitting on the desk, humming softly, bathed in a blue glow that didn't light the room so much as stain it. The device looked almost organic, spherical, and covered in intricate etchings that writhed beneath the surface, shifting like living things just beneath a layer of glass. I didn't mean to reach for it, not really, but something inside me overrode caution. The moment my skin met its surface, my world ruptured. An electric scream shot through my body, and then everything changed. No room, no time, no gravity. Only visions. Planets that breathed. Machines with flesh. Creatures that shouldn't exist, and eyes, always eyes, watching from impossible angles. I floated in a sea of fractured reality, my mind stretching to its limits, and just as I thought I might snap entirely, it all went black. I woke up on the floor, cold and drenched in sweat, my limbs numb and my thoughts flickering like faulty light bulbs. The office was silent again. The device was gone. In its place lay a single piece of paper, trembling slightly in an unfelt breeze. On it, scrawled in Dr. Ericsson's unmistakable handwriting: "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. You were never supposed to see this. Run, before they find you too." My throat closed. I didn't know who they were, but something in those strange visions whispered that they were already close. The sound of footsteps broke the stillness like a knife through glass, measured, heavy, too close. I barely had time to react before the office door creaked open and 2 men stepped inside, their silhouettes stark against the hallway light. I held my breath, pressed flat behind Ericsson's desk, heart hammering so violently I thought it might give me away. Their voices were low, cold, clinical. "She's compromised," one said. "We need to contain this." The other replied, "What about the girl? The new researcher?" And then, the words that hollowed out my lungs: "She knows too much. Take care of it." I clamped a hand over my mouth, nausea rising like bile. They were talking about me. I didn't think. I moved. Crawling, slow and silent, toward the window. I barely reached it before a hand closed around my shoulder. I spun, instinct taking over, and drove my elbow into his gut. He gasped, stumbling back just enough for me to break free. I ran. The hallway blurred around me as alarms began to shriek, painting the walls in pulsing red. Voices shouted behind me. Footsteps thundered in pursuit. I turned blindly through corridors, past labs filled with impossible machines, vats of shifting light, walls etched with symbols that burned my eyes to look at. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Then, tucked behind a massive piece of unused equipment, I saw it, a door I had never noticed before, unmarked, smooth, no handle. As I neared, it slid open on its own, silent and seamless. I didn't hesitate. I slipped inside, and the door hissed shut behind me, sealing me in complete darkness. For one breathless moment, I thought I had trapped myself. But then, somewhere overhead, a light flickered to life, dim and sterile, revealing a corridor unlike any I'd seen in this facility. Long, narrow, stretching far beyond what should have been possible. I didn't know where I was, or what I had just escaped into, but whatever lay ahead had to be safer than the thing that had just tried to erase me. At least, that's what I told myself as I started walking. The corridor stretched on like a nightmare, cold, featureless, and impossibly long, with no turns, no doors, no sound except the soft, mechanical hum that vibrated beneath my feet. The walls were a sterile white, but they seemed to pulse faintly, as if the hallway itself was alive, breathing in sync with my panic. I ran at first, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever those men were, but soon my pace slowed. Not from exhaustion, but from the oppressive weight of the place, a sense that reality was beginning to fold in on itself. Just as doubt began to gnaw at the edges of my resolve, I saw it, another door, unlike any I'd seen before. It stood at the very end, glowing with that same eerie blue light that had surrounded the device in Dr. Erickson's office. My feet moved on their own, drawn forward like a moth to flame, and when I reached for the handle, the metal was ice cold against my skin. The moment my fingers closed around it, the energy surged again, fiercer this time. My vision shattered into blinding fragments as incomprehensible images flooded my mind. But they weren't chaotic like before. They were layered, structured, like a map unraveling in my brain. Equations I couldn't have known scrolled across my vision. Galaxies spun backward. Cells divided infinitely. A chorus of thoughts, not my own whispered truths about time, space, consciousness, truths I couldn't unsee. Then, the door opened. Not into another room, but into something alive and swirling, a vortex that shimmered with impossible colors and folded space like silk. I stood on the edge, heart hammering against my ribs, every instinct screaming for me to turn back. But behind me was silence, and in front of me, everything else. And so I stepped forward, into the spiral, into the unknown, into the place where science and nightmare held hands in the dark. The vortex spat me out into a vast chamber that defied logic, a space that shimmered and breathed like it had a will of its own. The walls weren't walls, they shifted between solid and translucent, revealing glimpses of landscapes that pulsed with alien life and machinery that looked back at me. Strange instruments hovered in midair, spinning silently, emitting soft tones that resonated in my chest. And then I heard it, a voice, calm and familiar, but changed. "Welcome, Dr. Levine." I turned and there he was, Dr. Erickson. But older. Not aged exactly, more refined, as if time had passed differently for him. His presence carried weight, like gravity had learned to bend around him. "What is this place?" I whispered, my voice barely holding together. He looked at me with a strange mixture of pride and regret. "This is where the boundaries of science fall away. Where we explore what lies beyond our universe, beyond all universes." Others emerged from the shadows, some humanoid, others not, their forms fluid, their eyes ancient. They watched me not with suspicion, but with a kind of solemn curiosity. Dr. Erickson stepped closer, gesturing toward a pedestal where a more advanced version of the glowing device pulsed softly, almost inviting. "You seem too much to return unchanged," he said, "but you still have a choice. If you want, we can send you back. Your memory wiped. Your life, normal again." Or, his eyes bore into mine, and I felt the enormity of what he was about to offer. "Or you stay. You join us. And you help us unlock the secrets of the multiverse. But if you stay, you leave everything behind, your past, your world, everyone you've ever known." My breath caught. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of consequence. Behind me, the portal flickered, but its pull was weaker now, like it knew the decision had already been made. I stared at the device, at the shimmering walls, at the impossible beings waiting for my answer, and I felt something stir inside me. Wonder. Terror. Purpose. I stood there, caught in the gravity of the moment, the quiet hum of the device on the pedestal echoing like a heartbeat I hadn't realized I shared. Behind me, the swirling vortex crackled faintly, the last flicker of a world that had once been mine, routine, predictable, safe. But it felt small now, almost fictional, like something I had read in a forgotten book. Dr. Erickson's eyes never left mine, patient and knowing, like he'd already seen the choice written across my face. I wanted to deny it, to cling to what I knew, my name, my memories, the comforting illusion of control, but the pull of the unknown was stronger. It always had been. I took a step toward the device, then another, until my hand hovered just above its surface. "Where do we start?" I asked, my voice low, steady despite the tremor in my chest. For a moment, Erickson said nothing. Then his lips curled into a slow, genuine smile, one tinged with awe and the weight of secrets far too large for any one mind to carry. "Welcome to the team, Dr. Levine," he said. "We have so much to show you. Around us, the chamber seemed to breathe, the walls shifting to reveal glimpses of other realities, twisting cities suspended in skyless voids, forests growing backward through time, oceans made of light and thought. The other beings gathered, not as scientists or masters, but as witnesses. I could feel their anticipation, their fear, their reverence. This wasn't just a new beginning, it was a shedding of skin, a birth into something vast and unknowable. And as the light from the pedestal flared, bathing us all in that unearthly glow, I felt my old self dissolving, memories softening at the edges, names fading, the tether to who I had been slipping from my grasp. I didn't know what waited for me in this place, or what I would become, but I knew the truth. The journey into the multiverse had already begun, and there was no going back. Story 9. The moment I laid eyes on the Willow Creek Inn, an unease curled in my gut that had nothing to do with the crisp autumn air. The weathered Victorian facade towered over me like a forgotten relic, its peeling paint and gabled windows far from the cozy charm promised in the brochure. I told myself it was just nerves, just exhaustion from the chaos of city life that had driven me to book this impulsive weekend escape, but the sensation didn't fade as I hauled my suitcase up the groaning wooden steps. Something about this place whispered wrong. The door creaked open before I could even reach for the key, revealing a petite woman with silver hair and icy blue eyes that locked onto mine with unsettling precision. "Welcome to Willow Creek Inn," she said sweetly, her smile too polished, too practiced, and not quite human in the way it refused to reach her eyes. "You must be Emily. We've been expecting you." I tried to match her warmth, pushing down the tight knot forming in my stomach, and followed her into the foyer while she chattered about the inn's history in a syrupy tone that made my skin crawl. But I wasn't listening. My gaze drifted to the staircase, where strange symbols, curved, sharp, and ancient, were etched into the banister like forgotten warnings. They didn't belong in a bed and breakfast. They didn't belong anywhere. "Your room's on the 3rd floor," she added, her voice taking on a brittle edge, "last door on the right. Dinner is at 7, don't be late." The way she said it, it wasn't a suggestion. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the creeping dread that clung to me like a second skin. I told myself I was just overthinking it. Just tired. Just paranoid. But even as I climbed the stairs, each creaking step groaning beneath me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the inn was watching, that something behind the wallpaper, behind the symbols, behind Mrs. Holloway's too smooth smile, was already pulling me deeper in. The stillness in the inn was unnerving, not the kind that soothed but the kind that listened, the kind that made the hair on my neck prickle with awareness. According to the brochure, Willow Creek Inn was fully booked this time of year, yet I heard no footsteps in the halls, no murmured conversations behind closed doors, no distant laughter, only silence, thick and expectant. I tried to tell myself it was part of the charm, the seclusion I'd wanted, but the quiet felt too deliberate, too rehearsed. Outside, the gardens were a tangle of autumn fire, burnt orange, deep crimson, gold, but what should have been peaceful only deepened my sense of being watched. Nestled among the hedges were strange stone statues, their surfaces worn smooth, their eyeless faces turned not outward but inward, all of them staring at the inn like silent witnesses to something long buried. I didn't notice the man right away, tall and lean with a faded gardener's apron and a smile that tugged a little too hard at his cheeks. "Enjoying the gardens, miss?" he asked, voice low and gravelly. I nodded, hesitating. "Those statues, they're interesting." His smile faltered for just a second. "Ah, yes. Family heirlooms. Best not to pay them too much mind." His eyes lingered on me too long, and then, as if on cue, the dinner bell rang, a low, mournful chime that echoed through the trees. "Best not to be late," he added, already turning away. Back inside, the dining room was warm and candlelit, yet the moment I stepped through the threshold, a strange hush fell over the room. 5 guests sat at the table, middle-aged or older, every one of them watching me with a quiet intensity that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Holloway appeared beside me, guiding me to the only empty chair with that same practiced smile. "So glad you could join us, Emily," she said. "We were just about to begin." Their eyes never left me, and as I tried to make conversation, each of them responded with vague platitudes or changed the subject entirely. It was as if they knew something I didn't, something I wasn't supposed to understand until it was far too late. The dining room flickered with soft candlelight, shadows dancing lazily across the faded wallpaper, but nothing could warm the cold knot tightening in my stomach as Mrs. Holloway emerged from the kitchen cradling a silver tray like it held something sacred. "My special recipe," she announced sweetly, placing a delicate dish of blood-red sorbet in front of each guest, her eyes lingering on me with an intensity that made my skin itch. The others murmured their approval, lifting spoons with synchronized elegance, and I felt their collective gaze shift as I hesitated, the icy crimson mound before me pulsing with a strange shimmer under the candlelight. I didn't want to seem rude. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just dessert. With a small, uneasy smile, I took a bite. At first, it was exquisite, sharp and sweet, like raspberries kissed by frost, but almost immediately, a bitter undertone crept in, metallic and wrong, coating my tongue with something that tasted ancient. My vision blurred, the room tilting in slow, disorienting waves as laughter turned into echoes and voices stretched and twisted, sounding as though they came from underwater. A wave of nausea crashed over me, and the edges of my sight began to fray like burned paper. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Holloway's voice came from far away, distorted and syrupy, like a record played at the wrong speed. I tried to speak, to rise from my chair, but my limbs refused to cooperate, heavy as stone. The faces around the table warped, their features melting into grotesque masks of curiosity and hunger, watching me not with concern, but with expectation. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, my breath shallow and ragged, as the room spun faster and faster until it all fractured into blackness. The last thing I saw was Mrs. Holloway leaning closer, her smile now stripped of all pretense, predatory and patient, as if she had waited a long, long time for this exact moment. I woke with a jolt, heart pounding against my ribs like it knew something I didn't, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was until the shadows began to move. The room was steeped in darkness, thick and suffocating, and as my eyes adjusted, I realized I wasn't alone. Figures stood silently around my bed, tall and formless, their outlines pulsing and shifting like smoke barely held together by shape. I tried to scream, to move, anything, but my body refused to respond, as if every limb had been stitched to the mattress. Panic surged, a scream trapped in my throat, and then one of the figures leaned closer, so close I could feel the cold absence of breath against my cheek. "She's perfect," it whispered, the voice dry and ancient, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. "The ritual can begin." Something inside me snapped, I don't know how, but the spell broke. I bolted upright, stumbling from the bed, crashing into furniture in the blind scramble toward the door, only to find it locked, the key missing. The shadows advanced, writhing, mouths that weren't mouths opening in soundless moans. I backed away, frantic, when I spotted it, a square outline in the ceiling, nearly invisible against the molding. Desperation took over. I dragged the desk chair beneath it, climbed, shoved upward with all the strength I had, and the trapdoor gave way with a groan of old wood. I pulled myself into the attic just as the shadows reached for my ankles. The space above was damp and musty, filled with forgotten relics and air that hadn't been breathed in decades. I crawled blindly through cobwebs and darkness, fingers trembling against the warped boards until I found another opening, a second trapdoor. When I dropped through it, the world below was no longer the inn I remembered. The hall twisted in unnatural angles, paintings with eyes that followed me lined the walls, and the very air pulsed with something ancient and watching. Somewhere deeper in the house, a chant began, low and rhythmic, as if the building itself was awakening. I was no longer in a place meant for rest. I was inside something living, and it knew I was here. The hallway led me to the top of the main staircase, and as I crept down each step, my breath shallow and fists clenched, I saw them, Mrs. Holloway, the gardener, and the other guests, no longer just odd strangers but something else entirely, standing in a perfect circle beneath the flickering chandelier, their bodies draped in deep crimson robes embroidered with the same strange symbols I'd seen carved into the wood upstairs. But now, those symbols moved, slithering like living ink across the fabric, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to echo from the very walls. A low chant filled the air, a language I didn't understand but that made the marrow in my bones ache with dread. Mrs. Holloway lifted her head, eyes locking with mine from across the foyer, and the warmth she'd once feigned was gone, replaced by something hollow, ancient, and ravenous. "There you are, my dear," she called, her voice reverberating with unnatural power. "It's time to take your place in the circle." I turned to flee back up the stairs, but the shadows were already there, twisting and solidifying, blocking every path except one, the front door. I ran for it, heart thundering, hope flaring like a match. My hand closed around the cold brass knob just as a searing pain erupted across my forearm, white-hot and blinding. I looked down in horror to see one of the symbols from their robes burned into my skin, etching itself with cruel precision as if branding me for something I didn't want to understand. I screamed, half in pain, half in terror, but the chanting only grew louder, more fevered, more hungry. The door groaned under my weight, then swung open, not to the gardens or the road, but to something else entirely. The air beyond was black and shifting, a void that seemed to breathe. I stood there frozen on the threshold, the burning mark on my arm still pulsing, the circle of robed figures behind me growing closer, and in that moment I understood I was never meant to leave. I wasn't a guest. I was an offering. The door swung open with a groan, but instead of the gravel path, the gardens, or any trace of the outside world I'd known, there was only darkness, thick, endless, and alive. It churned like a storm cloud held in place, an abyss that breathed in slow, rhythmic pulses, beckoning me with a quiet hunger. Behind me, the chanting rose to a fever pitch, the circle of crimson-robed figures closing in, their eyes hollow with ancient purpose, their symbols writhing like worms on fabric soaked in time. My arm still burned where the mark had been seared into my flesh, a constant reminder that I was claimed, chosen. I stood on the threshold, trembling, the edges of reality blurring with each beat of that infernal chant, and I realized this was it. This was the choice. I could step back, surrender to the ritual and become another echo in the end's endless cycle, a vessel for their twisted preservation. Or I could leap into the unknown, into the void that offered no promises, no salvation, just the possibility of freedom, or perhaps something even worse. My heart was a drumbeat of panic, but something deeper inside whispered go. So I did. I stepped forward, into the cold, devouring dark, and it folded around me like velvet soaked in ice. I didn't fall. I didn't float. I simply ceased to be where I was. And now I don't know if I ever truly left. Sometimes, when the wind outside howls just right, I still hear their chanting, distant but insistent, like a thread tugging me back. Sometimes I catch glimpses of other places, fractured reflections in mirrors that show halls I've never walked, or feel the warmth of candlelight on my skin when I'm alone in the dark. Maybe I escaped. Maybe I became something else. Or maybe, just maybe, I never left the Willow Creek Inn at all. Be careful where you rest. Some vacations don't end when you check out. Story 10. The neon sign of the 24-hour diner sputtered weakly against the pre-dawn dark, casting a cold, flickering glow over the cracked asphalt of the empty highway. I pushed open the smudged glass door, the soft chime above it breaking the silence like a whisper in a tomb, and stepped inside, greeted by the stale scent of burnt coffee and old grease. It was my third night shift this week at the round-the-clock cafe, and already the place felt more familiar than my own apartment, though somehow colder, less real. As I tied my apron with mechanical movements, I glanced toward the far corner, and there they were again, 5 of them, always the same 5, seated in rigid stillness around the same table, their faces half lit by the dull overhead bulbs. They were regulars, in the loosest sense of the word, because no one ever saw them arrive or leave. They didn't order food, barely moved, only sat in silence with chipped mugs of coffee that never emptied, never steamed. When I walked past their table, their hushed conversations would cease as if a switch had been flipped, and their eyes, dark, unblinking, heavy with something I couldn't name, would follow me with unnatural focus. It made my skin itch. "Hey Sarah," Jake called from behind the counter, his voice a poor attempt at levity. "You're just in time for the graveyard special." I forced a brittle smile, masking the dread curling tight in my chest. "Let me guess," I muttered, "burnt coffee and stale donuts?" He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. That was the first time I asked him, "Jake, have you noticed anything weird about those people?" I nodded subtly toward the corner. He looked over, then leaned in, his voice barely audible. "Not just weird," he said. "I asked Marge, from day shift. She says she's never seen them come or go. They're just, always here." His words settled in me like ice water. "But we close for cleaning every Sunday," I protested, weakly. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but the door chimed again, and a bleary-eyed trucker shuffled in, killing the moment. We didn't talk about it again that night, but I couldn't stop watching the table. At one point, I swore the man with the gaunt cheeks and deep-set eyes shimmered, like static on a screen, before snapping back into focus. I blinked, and he was whole again. The hours dragged past in a slow, uneasy crawl. Around 3 a.m., the diner emptied, save for me, Jake, and the 5 silent watchers. The air felt thick, the kind of oppressive quiet that hums with invisible pressure. Jake muttered something about taking out the trash and slipped out the back. The moment he left, one of them moved, a woman with bone-white hair rising smoothly from her seat, gliding toward me across the linoleum with a grace that didn't belong to anything human. She stopped just shy of the counter and said my name. Not hey or excuse me, just Sarah, in a voice as dry and brittle as withered leaves. I froze. I never wore a name tag. I'm sorry, do I know? She cut me off. You've noticed us, she said, now inches from me. Her eyes were solid black, endless, consuming. You feel the wrongness of this place. My mouth went dry. I wanted to back away, but I couldn't move. I asked who they were. She smiled, and her teeth were too sharp. We are the Watchers, she said. And you, Sarah, have been chosen. As the hours inched past 3, the diner slipped into a strange kind of stillness, the kind that buzzed under the skin, like something unseen was watching, waiting. Jake muttered that he was heading out to take the trash, and the moment the back door swung shut behind him, the silence thickened into something almost physical. I was wiping down the counter, trying to ignore the unease threading through me, when I saw her, one of the 5 regulars, the woman with the shock of white hair, rising slowly from her seat. She didn't walk so much as glide, her feet whispering across the linoleum without sound. I froze, dish rag still in hand, as she approached the counter with eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, pitch black, and utterly devoid of anything human. Sarah, she said. Just that. My name, spoken in a whisper that echoed like it had come from somewhere much older and colder than this world. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I never wore a name tag. No one here should have known my name. I'm sorry, I stammered, do I know you? She didn't answer the question. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her mouth curling into a too wide smile. You've noticed, she said softly. You've felt it. The wrongness of this place. The thinness of the veil. I took a step back, every instinct screaming for me to run, but my legs felt leaden. Who are you? I managed to ask, the words barely escaping. Her smile deepened. We are the Watchers, she said. Guardians of the Threshold. And you, Sarah, you have been chosen. Before I could speak, before I could scream or even turn away, the lights in the diner flickered violently, bathing everything in a strobe of cold white and choking dark. Then the power died entirely, plunging the place into suffocating blackness. I gasped, heart thundering in my ears, and in that pitch void, I felt it, 5 shapes closing in, surrounding me, moving without sound but heavy with presence. When the lights surged back on, I was no longer alone behind the counter. The Watchers stood in a circle around me, their eyes like obsidian mirrors, reflecting nothing but swallowing everything. Jake was gone. Just gone. Where is he? I demanded, my voice trembling. Where's Jake? The gaunt man with hollow eyes stepped forward, his voice like rust in gravel. Jake is no longer with us, he said. He served his purpose. My stomach dropped. You killed him? The woman shook her head slowly, her white hair barely moving. Not killed, she said. Transformed. As you will be. My mind reeled, trying to piece together the impossible, the unseen, the truth that had been lurking just beneath the surface this whole time. I thought of the endless night shifts, the missing employees no one seemed to talk about, the way Jake had always brushed off questions with hollow laughter. Something in me shattered then, not from fear, but from recognition. Somewhere deep down, I'd always known this place wasn't right. That something ancient and patient waited here. And now it had found me. The diner began to unravel around me, as though reality itself had grown tired of the illusion, walls pulsing and bending inward, lights stuttering like the last breaths of a dying star, floor tiles shimmering until they bled into the air and vanished. I blinked, but the world didn't return to normal. Instead, the ceiling dissolved into an abyss of endless stars, a vast, shimmering void that stretched in all directions, swallowing time and place. The counters, the booths, the coffee machines all melted into mist and shadow, leaving only the 5 of them circling me beneath an invisible sky. Their black eyes gleamed in the starlight, no longer pretending to be human, no longer tethered to the rules of this world. "This," the white-haired woman whispered, "is what lies beneath the veil." Her voice echoed unnaturally, not from her lips but from every point in the shifting space around us. "This place," she continued, gesturing to the diner now void, "is a nexus, a crossroads between what was, what is, and what could never be. We have guarded it for longer than you can comprehend." The gaunt man stepped forward, his face eerily calm, almost mournful. "But time corrodes even the eternal. Our watch nears its end. We need one who can see, one who was drawn here not by accident, but by resonance." I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat, drowned by the weight of what I was seeing, worlds layered upon worlds, phantoms of other dimensions flickering at the edges of vision, places where physics twisted into dreams and nightmares, where time looped and bled. And I saw myself in those places, or versions of me, some still human, some monstrous, some little more than memory trapped in light. I swallowed hard, struggling to stay anchored. "Why me?" I asked, finally. "I'm nobody. Just a waitress." The woman smiled gently, but there was no warmth in it. "But you've always known, haven't you? Felt the fraying of the world around you. The whispers that never had a mouth. The dreams that bled into waking life. You see the cracks." I thought of the way the regulars' eyes had haunted me, the moments when time in the diner seemed to stutter, the feeling that something was always watching, just behind the lights. "If I say no?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The man's expression darkened. "Then you will be returned, altered, fragmented. Like the others who chose blindness over truth. And we will continue our search." The void pulsed, and for a moment I felt myself drifting, disassembling at the edges. I could almost hear Jake's voice, distant, warped, like an echo across broken glass. "And if I say yes?" I whispered. The woman stepped closer, her presence suddenly immense. "Then you will become what we are. A guardian of the threshold. A watcher at the seam of realities. You will see what others cannot, and you will protect the world from what waits beyond." As the space around me spun with impossible stars and distant screams, I realized I was already halfway there. I had felt it the moment I stepped into this place. The diner had chosen me long before I understood its rules. I closed my eyes, and nodded once, knowing there was no turning back. The moment I whispered yes, the world cracked open like an egg, and something vast and unknowable spilled through me, light and darkness, time and silence, all folding in on themselves as I stood suspended in a place beyond place. My body dissolved into sensation, and my thoughts unraveled like thread pulled through a needle of stars. I could see everything then, not with eyes but with something deeper, more ancient, every possible future blooming outward in fractal patterns, infinite versions of myself flickering across overlapping dimensions, some screaming, some watching, some already transformed. I saw the diner as it truly was, a fragile anchor tethered to a dozen bleeding realities, each one more unstable than the last. I saw the watchers in their true forms, towering and radiant and terrifying, no longer bound by flesh or speech or the illusion of humanity. The transformation came like a tide, sweeping away who I had been and leaving something hollowed and filled at once, something that pulsed with the rhythm of collapsing stars. When it was over, I found myself back in the diner, but nothing was the same. The familiar booths and counters shimmered with threads of power, shimmering rifts where dimensions brushed against each other like breath on glass. My hands looked the same, but when I caught my reflection in the window, I saw the eyes black, bottomless, watcher eyes, and I knew I could never go back. The others nodded at me from the corner table, silent and approving. I walked to them on legs that felt both mine and not, and sat in the empty sixth seat that had always been waiting. The air vibrated softly around us, as if the diner itself was exhaling. Then the bell above the door chimed, sharp and clear, and a man stepped inside, rubbing sleep from his eyes, just another traveler in the dead hours of the night. He didn't look at us. He didn't need to. To him, we were just background noise, shadows in the periphery of a too quiet place. But I could see more now. I could see the flicker in the air around him, the faint shimmer of something clinging to his soul, some thread from another world tangled through his being. I watched him take a seat, order a coffee, and stare into the darkness outside the window like he was searching for something he couldn't name. And I wondered, not for the first time, how many other diners like this one were scattered across the map, tucked into forgotten towns and lonely highways, portals disguised as ordinary places, held together by people like us. Guardians. Watchers. Bound by choice or fate or both. How thin was the veil, really, between the world we know and the ones that press against it from the other side? Maybe the real question wasn't what we were guarding against, but what might happen if we ever stopped.